Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2/22/22 Parks and Recreation meeting. The first order of business is a call to order and roll call. So how can we proceed with the roll call, please, Lom?
Yes. Chair Greenfield.
Here.
Vice Chair Lemaire. Vice Chair Lemaire did say that he was not going to be able to make it. Commissioner Cribbs.
Here.
Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Winehouse. Commissioner Kleinhaus, can we have a verbal?
Unmute.
Oh, yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Chair, that is 5 present.
Thank you. And given that the vice chair will not be here this evening, I'd like to ask that former chair Cribbs be my backup this evening in the event anything should happen. That's okay.
Fine with me.
Thank you. Hopefully it will be light duty this evening.
I'm sure it will be. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
I also like to welcome Councilmember Du Bois, who's just joined us. Thank you. Next up is any agenda changes, additions, or deletions. Does anyone have any comments in this area this evening? I'm sorry, I skipped the opportunity for public comment. Jumping ahead. Lom, do we have any members of the public with their hands raised who'd like to speak this evening? Good. I see one hand now.
Yes.
And if anybody else would like to speak to an item that's not on the agenda this evening, that now's the time to please raise your hand through Zoom, and you'll have up to 3 minutes to talk. And if you can express what you need in less time than that, that's always welcome.
Okay, Chair, I'm still showing only one hand. That is Lisa Steinbach, excuse me, I apologize. And may I begin? Chair, may I begin?
Yes, go ahead, please. Sorry.
Thank you. Lisa, if you could unmute it, and you may begin with 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Yeah, a couple items. Number one, would really like to hear the plan for the resurfacing of the Cubberley tennis courts. It's long overdue. And in fact, I would argue that Palo Alto has a potential liability due to safety problems on those courts. I was there very recently. There are gouges out of the courts, missing surface, where there are deep divots in the courts that are, in fact, you're renting those courts to USTA teams even. Very, very dangerous to be on those courts with the divots and chances for tripping and falling. It's really a miracle, actually, that you haven't been sued by somebody who has fallen badly on those courts. That's how bad they are. I welcome you to go out there and take a look. It really should be at the top of the court resurfacing schedule for this year, at the very top. The other item is lighting, okay, of any courts. The lights, I realize, are up on pedestals. There are a number of burned out lights at Rinconada, courts 4, like 2, 3, and 4 along there. And you're renting those courts at night, after dark. And it seems like you should be replacing burned out bulbs. I was told that you wait until a certain number of bulbs are burned out before you replace bulbs. Well, you know, for the people trying to play USTA matches and whatnot, it's dim at the courts. And so again, if you're renting these courts, you know, people are paying money to rent the courts. It just seems like you should have a higher frequency of replacing the burned out bulbs. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. And I see we have no further speakers. So now we'll move on to agenda changes, additions, and deletions. Does anyone have anything here this evening? Okay, then we'll move on to our first business item, which is adoption of the resolution authorizing use of teleconferencing for Parks and Recreation meeting during our current COVID-19 state of emergency. And be looking for a motion to proceed as we have been for the past number of months.
I'll make the motion.
And a second.
I'll second.
Go ahead.
I'll second.
Nice enthusiasm, thank you. Lom, could we please have a roll call vote on that?
Yes. Chair Greenfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Cribbs,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Kleinhaus.
Yes.
Chair, that's a 5-0 vote.
Thank you. Next up is approval of minutes from our January 25th meeting last month. Does anyone have any changes or updates to suggest for the minutes? And if not, then is it possible to have a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you. In a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And again, a roll call vote, please, Lom.
Yes. Chair Greenfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Cribbs,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Kleinhaus.
Yes.
Chair, that's a 5-0 vote.
Thank you. Next up is the department report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Darren Anderson with the Community Services Department. I've got some updates I'd like to share with you. Starting in March, all board, committee, and commission meetings will be held both in person and hybrid. So we'll be in person, and members of the public and select staff making presentations can participate remotely via Zoom. And again, that starts for our March meeting. Commissioners should receive an email from the clerk's office with details on the process for that. And Chair, at our next meeting, I'll walk you through some of the training we've got on how staff will help manage that process. Some information on Cubberley Gym. Both Cubberley Gym A and B rentals have been canceled until further notice due to some flooding issues. Facilities staff discovered major flooding under the Cubberley Gyms A and B when investigating the hardwood floors that were showing signs of discoloration. They found 3 inches of standing water, and they are working on repair. It looks like there are a few leaks that need to be repaired. They're bringing in a contractor to help work on that. So it'll be closed for several weeks while the repairs are made, and they hire a remediation company to help dehumidify and make repairs. At Council on February 14th, the Council passed a motion, which I'll just share briefly with you, that was to direct staff to pause preparation of the Cubberley Concept Plan, CEQA, and request a joint meeting with the PAUSD School Board and City Council prior to the June break, and ask staff to return to Council with a work plan to include exploring a land swap at Fletcher or financial framework for acquiring available land, and 2, to a scope and design process for Cubberley Community Center that is city-owned once the acreage is determined. Some upcoming City Council discussions of note. On March 7th, there's 2 topics relevant to the Parks and Rec Commission. One is the PRC recommendation on new community gymnasium project, and also the Foothills Fire Mitigation and Safety Improvement Strategies. Both those will be on March 7th. On March 14th, the Roth Building lease will be discussed. And on April 11th, the first T proposal for improvements to the youth practice area and driving range area is listed as an action item. The Cubberley tennis courts are scheduled to be resurfaced in April, mid-April. The Cubberley Field renovation project, this is renovating the natural grass fields out there. It's nearly complete. The fields will be reopened this Friday, February 25th. The Baylands Athletic Center baseball field, same thing, was under renovation. That will be opening March 4th. And then the Eleanor Pardee field, also renovated, will open March 14th. There's a Walk with a Naturalist program at the Baylands. Class meets in front of the Baylands Nature Interpretive Center, and the program includes time out in the trails and time in the Interpretive Center. The participant capacity is 25 people, and everyone must register for this program, which you can do on the Enjoy online. And the dates for that, there are 3 programs: Saturday, February 26th, Saturday, March 12th, and Saturday, March 26th, and all of them are in the same time frame, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. An update on summer camp registration. It's gone well. Registrations are higher compared to the last 3 summers. 185 of the 244 camps have already met the minimum number of enrolled campers to move forward. 108 camps are totally full and have waitlist form. And we have about 1,250 open spots remaining for campers to register. And registration will remain open through the spring. CSD will host a table at the Summer Camp Fair on March 6th at Palo Alto High School, advertising camps and recruiting counselors for summer 2022. And Chair, that concludes the department report.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have any comments or questions regarding the report? Ann?
Yes, I have a question about the CPRS conference, Darren, coming up in March. Is the city community services planning to send any staff people to that conference?
Yet to be identified, Chair. There may be some staff working on it, but we haven't discussed it as a team as of yet.
And Ann, could you please clarify for everyone what CPRS is?
Oh, of course. California Park and Recreation Society, right?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councilmember Boyes, you have your hand up?
I just had a question about the gym flooding. How's that impacting the basketball season? And are we trying to find any alternative space? I mean, what's the impact, I guess, of closing the gyms?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Du Bois. I had just heard this news this afternoon, so I don't have too many details. I do have a colleague from Recreation that might have a little bit more. Adam, Howard, do you have any information on this one you could share with the group?
I'm sorry, I don't have a ton. This news just came out very recently, maybe over this weekend. So staff, I know today was kind of scrambling to get all the notifications out, get an understanding of who's being impacted. We still have the Pavilion, so if we can do some rearranging and put more groups in the Pavilion, we will. I think we'll have a more clear picture of how many impacts we have by tomorrow. I know staff was working on it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Freeman.
Yeah, I just have one question regarding the resurface of the Cubberley tennis courts. Do you have a kind of a schedule for that? I mean, I assume that the resurfacing requires taking the courts offline, and sort of how will that notification go out to the public as to which courts are down for resurfacing and kind of when that reopening would take place?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Freeman. Mid-April is the approximate start date. I think it's a 30 to 45 day window. We'll have signage posted at the courts well in advance, information for the Cubberley staff as well. And of course, I'll announce it to the Parks and Rec Commission and see if we can't get it on our website as well.
Thank you. Any other comments? I have a question or two regarding the Coverly gym issue. I'm assuming the funding for that repair will come out of the annual Coverly budget, or can you clarify where that will be coming from?
Yet to be determined. I would imagine it's funds that are specifically designated for Coverly maintenance.
And regarding the direction from City Council for staff to explore the land swap at Fletcher, I assume that's referring to Turbine Park, which
that's correct.
Which is, so the middle school has been renamed Fletcher, but the park name remains Turbine. And
that's correct.
And potentially what's at play here is swapping parkland or fields at Coverly for fields at Fletcher, or it could be
land on Turbine Park for land at Coverly to be explored.
And so council has directed staff on this. And what do you perceive the Parks and Rec Commission role to be in this?
Certainly involved. I plan to bring it as a discussion item. We haven't yet begun working on it yet. So as I have more information, we'll learn more about the rest of the process and what it looks like. Okay, great. It's exciting news to have some opportunity to potentially be moving forward. And I'm excited about this, as I think many other commissioners will be as well. That's all I have in the way of questions. Anything else? Last opportunity for a follow-up or a question. Thank you, Darren, for the informative report as always. Next order of business is the ad hoc reports. Does anyone, we just recently created the ad hocs for the next roughly 16 months. Does anyone have any report regarding their ad hoc or liaison to share with the commission at this time? And I'm not surprised that there isn't anything that there's a lot that has been happening recently. Just to clarify, especially for the new commissioners, how the ad hocs and liaison roles work, and what should I be doing? Am I waiting for someone to call me? Do I call someone? I think in general, the ad hocs should be checking in with their staff liaison and with each other, or the members of the ad hoc, at least on a monthly basis, to see if there's something to be pursuing and work to be following up on. The staff liaison will be very helpful in leading you in this process to the extent that's necessary. At a certain point in time, many of the ad hocs are able to take over a lot of that lead on their own as well. As regarding the liaison roles, I would suggest that everyone check in with your staff liaison, particularly if you're in a new liaison role, reach out to them via email. If you need contact information, our staff liaison to the commission, Darren, will be happy to help you with that. And some of the liaison roles are, as we discussed, more like a basket sitting there to catch things that happen to fall that way. And so there'll be many months where there may not be much activity. If you're taking over a liaison role that someone else served in last year, it'd certainly be a good idea to check in with the commissioner, whether they're on the commission now or a previous commissioner, to get get information, help with continuity, and help you come up to speed as needed. And so at this time next month, in our meeting next month, we'll look to get more detailed updates from our ad hocs. The other thing I would add specifically regarding the ad hocs is next month's agenda will include our work plans that will be hoping to complete to present to City Council for approval afterwards. And so each ad hoc should be focused this coming month
in the earlier part of the time period as well to work on nailing down their work plan, work with your staff liaison, look at the work plan from last year, if there was one that's somewhat related to the work moving forward. And each of the ad hocs will be looking to submit their work plan to staff, and this will be included in the agenda item that comes on, they'll be shared with us a week before our next meeting. So at that point in time, that's when all of the commissioners will be able to see the work plans that are being proposed by the ad hocs. And then when we get together on that agenda item, we'll look to complete our work plan as a body. And so it would be led by the ad hocs who are associated with the work plan items, but also with any input from commission members. Any questions on any of that? Darren, do you have any other suggestions or comments related to ad hocs, liaisons, and work plans? And actually, a related question is, we've been looking for sample work plans or guidance from the city clerk's office in terms of how we should be moving forward with our work plans this year. Any information would be very helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The only things I'll add is please reach out to me if there's anything I can do to help with the development of each individual ad hoc's work plan element. Glad to help facilitate that and help in any way I can. The second question about a revised or updated template or form that was going to come, we were informed was going to come from the clerk's office, has yet to arrive. I've got an inquiry in to the clerk's office to ask on when we might expect that. But I think the appropriate, given the time frame, the appropriate course of action is to continue with the template we've got. And if we get something in the near term that we have time to alter and change before our March meeting, we can do so.
Thank you. And if we do get feedback from the clerk's office or other staff members on work plan guidance, that'll just be something that you'll be forwarding to the commission members. And is that something that would then need to be shared? Would that need to be a memo that would become part of our public record, since you'd be sharing it with all the commission members? Anyway, that's something.
Yeah, I think we could probably either put it on the website, but I think we can email it out with any Brown Act problems to all the commission members.
Okay, and thanks. But after it is emailed out, would it need to be part of our record at the next meeting, sort of like emails that come into the commission?
Yeah, I'll look into that.
Great, thank you.
Chair, when we look at the ad hoc committees, there are 3 without any staff liaisons yet. Can we fill in the blanks yet or no?
Excellent point. Darren or Lam, are you able to share the list of ad hocs? If not, I could, and we could look at this real quickly. Thank you.
Yeah, let me give him a moment here. Let me find it and pull it up.
Thank you.
Lam, I've got it. If you want me to share it.
Yes, I'm still looking. Go ahead, Darren.
Okay.
Okay, so we're looking for staff liaison clarity on the electric conveyances policy, ad hoc, park dedication, and website refresh, but that's less critical because there won't be a work plan item associated with that.
Chair, I can help with the park dedication. And Lam, would you mind if I volunteer you for the website refresh?
I do not mind.
For the electric conveyance policy, let's also go with me.
Thank you. And Commissioner Cribbs, thank you for bringing that to our attention.
We've got one other one for the liaisons, or two actually. For dog parks, I'll put Darren. And park amenities, also Darren. And I think we're full.
That's great. Thank you.
Sure. And I'll email this to the full commission, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments before we move on? Thank you. Next up is our discussion or our action item regarding the supplement to development impact fee justification study. And can we move forward with the presentation on this, please?
Should I just start? I don't know if I'm supposed to introduce me or not.
Yeah, let's, if we could have a staff member introduce
Okay,
you.
great, thank you.
Sure. I can introduce if you want. Yeah, thank you. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Sarah Duffy with Community Services Department, and tonight we're going to present an update and recommendations regarding the development impact fees for parks, community centers, and libraries. And we have David here from DTA, and he's going to share the analysis and research that that he and his colleagues have worked on and some recommendations. Some quick background: DTA presented the initial fee impact nexus study to Parks and Recreation Commission, Finance Committee, and Council last fiscal year. And there were some follow-up questions, which DTA has researched and has some recommendations on. So after the presentation, they can answer any questions you have and you can advise on their recommendations. And the plan is that, once we have your feedback, we will move on to Finance Committee and Council with the goal of making any modifications and getting to the fees this fiscal year and getting council approval this fiscal year. So that's the timeline that we're working with. And I will turn it over to David.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it. I'm David Talzig. Previously, Nathan Perez was responsible for this project. He got an incredible offer from Google. We didn't have as much money as they do, so we could not match it. So he went off to Google. So I'm here today to present this. I've been working with Kyle Martinez, who actually did a lot of the work for Nate and has done virtually all the work here. And Kyle is here to help answer questions if we get into a lot of specifics. But basically, there was a fee program adopted by the City Council last April 12th, and actually implemented August 23rd. And as you may or may not know, I'm not sure how much background you have in this, the council had certain questions regarding certain assumptions made, and they wanted us to make updates based upon what we found looking a little bit harder into those assumptions. So we have a presentation here that talks about what the fees are right now, the issues that the City Council wanted us to take a look at. We made some changes to our recommendations regarding the fees based on some of the council's suggestions. And then there are some outstanding issues that particularly having to do with the price of land in Palo Alto that may have us further change the fees. But I do want to talk about those a little bit and before we go in front of the Finance Commission and the City Council, so that we have at least some concept from you as to what direction you'd like us to take, although we do have our own ideas, which we'll explain, and we'll see how you like them. So anyway, next slide, Kyle. Okay, so we're going to go over the current fee schedule. We're going to talk about what the City Council's, they were kind of like recommendations. They wanted us to look harder into certain issues, a summary of what our findings were, and then what our recommendations are at this point in time. Next slide. So the current fee programs, as you probably know, the fees kind of divided into three parts: the park fee, community center fee, and library fee, all being thrown together. And looking at the current levels, you can see for single family home, the park fee specifically, which is the one that we're talking about adjusting, it's $57,420 for single family home, $42,468 for a multifamily. When you add on the community center and the library, the total fee comes to about $64,500 for a single family home and $47,700 per multifamily home. Normally, when a developer pulls a building permit, that's when they're asked to pay that fee in order to get the building permit issued. As I think many of you know, it's not just a parks fee. There's usually a road fee, a sewer water hookup fee. There can be police, fire, all types of fees. And we're looking specifically today at the park fee. In addition, we had two non-residential categories. One was commercial industrial thrown together, and the other was hotel motel. And again, when you start dealing with non-residential and parks, the situation becomes sort of fluid, because while you have a resident who's residing in a particular city and lives there and is there on the weekends and is there, depending on where they work or where they go to school, is there a considerable amount of time. There's a certain usage of parks that comes with a resident versus an employee. An employee is somebody who, if they don't live in the community and are just an employee or coming in, they're working there probably 5 days a week and then they're going home. The way we allocate the fees between residential and non-residential is we say, okay, a residential person, and again, it depends where they work, whether they work in the city or not and how long they're here, but technically, theoretically, you can have a person residing in the community who's here 7 days a week and has access to the park 12 hours a day as long as it's light. With an employee, you've got somebody coming in, maybe they run for work for an hour, maybe they picnic at lunch or hang out in the park at lunch for an hour, and then maybe they stay an hour after work to participate in some type of baseball team or whatever. But you're thinking probably an average of 3 hours a day they would have access to a park. Not that they would use it 3 hours a day, but they have potential access 3 hours a day, 5 days a week is 15 hours a week. So the comparison is, normally we see that an employee uses a park based on the hours that the park's available to those individuals, uses a park about 18% as much as a resident. So one resident has about a little bit more than 5 times the usage of a park as a non-resident who is an employee. So in allocating these fees, and I think you all know the fee program very strict, you can only allocate the actual usage or benefit received by a particular land use from a park. You've got residential carrying a large portion of the weight, because residents have slightly more than 5 times the likelihood of using a park space in terms of hours available as an employee working in some non-residential facility. So just wanted to give you a little bit of background of where we come up with these numbers. And you can see for commercial industrial, the number was $18.91 per 1,000 square feet. And for hotel motel, it's $3.22. Per square foot. So $18.91 per square foot for commercial industrial and $3.22 per square foot for hotel motel. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I said, the city had concerns, they had questions, and they wanted us to look into several different issues. The first issue, I think maybe the most significant, was the value of the land. We had gotten information based on, we have access to certain databases that we pay a subscription for. And so we've gotten information for the last 10 years and the last 5 years regarding what the cost of land was. And the number we came up with was a figure of $5.7 million per acre. There's a lot of discussion regarding that, because if you as a city had to go out and buy parkland, particularly if you were buying it in an area that's a fairly expensive single family home area, again, you're normally looking at a vacant piece of land. There's not a lot of vacant land in Palo Alto. So you're in a slightly different position than most other cities. Most cities we go and there's a lot of vacant land and a lot of vacant land sales. We've got a really good cost of land. In your case, a little bit more difficult, because if you have to buy a piece of land that's got a house on it, knock the house down and put a park there, you're going to be paying a lot of money for that land. So the number you use is really a matter of what kind of assumptions you want to make. So we took a look at more recent data and we upped the number. Well, I'll show you in a minute what we did. But anyway, so 5.7 million was the number, and we'll show you the next page how we increased that to a new number that is higher, and how that affected the fee that I showed you on the previous page. Second item they brought up was they thought, you know, we want to look at more non-residential categories. Commercial, industrial together kind of throws together retail, it throws together office. We want to differentiate between those, because the number of persons working per square foot in each of these types of facilities is different. There was a feeling that we were using, I think it was 250 square feet per office worker, which is a standard we've used in our industry forever. As a matter of fact, when you rent space in an office, the building will give you one parking spot for every 250 square feet. But the feeling was that actually offices here, and we did discover this was correct, have more employees per square foot than what has been the standard average that we use in most cities. So we've redone our numbers based on that. And we did the same for retail. We did the same for hotel. We did the same for industrial. Again, I will show you in the next page what we did there. The third item was, and I can't read this whole thing because the pictures are over, but let's see, I've got it here. I believe it's updating the office density. That's part of what I talked about before, is that they thought that we didn't have enough office workers per square. We had 250 square feet per office worker. The feeling was it should be 190 square feet per office worker. We worked with folks at the city and we came up with some real numbers based on census data and based on the amount of square footage in the city right now that's office, and found that we really could have used 190 square feet per employee, which means you're generating more use of parks because you've got more employees per 1,000 square feet. So we made that adjustment. Recommend frequency for fee study updates. We work with a lot of cities that update their fee studies every 5 years. We do have an escalator that allows the fees to go up every year. So once we adopt these fees, the city adopts these fees, there will be an escalator that will allow it to go up every year a certain amount. But in terms of going back and revisiting it, seeing if there's been an increase in the cost of land that is greater than the amount of escalation we had every year, whether there's a different level of number of acres of park necessary, whether the quality of the park should be different, all of that can be reconsidered when you do a new fee study. But doing a fee study involves public hearings, it involves a lot of calculations, it involves going through a resolution adopted by a city council. There's a lot to it. And so the question is, how often do you want to redo your fee studies? And so our recommendations, you'll see, is once between every 5 years and 8 years, depending upon how long you're satisfied with the fee you have. The last fee you had for a while. And again, I think it is important to update, to take a look at new circumstances, especially if the annual escalator we have is not keeping up with the actual cost of providing whatever capital facilities you're trying to provide. In this case, we're talking mainly parks. Evaluating the single family, multifamily fee structure. There is going to be a new law. Actually, there is a new law and it starts applying July 1st. And if we approve these fees before then we can get away with having a fee, one fee for single family homes, no matter what the size of that home, and another fee per multifamily home, as you saw on the first page. If you adopt your fee after July 1st, or if you should so choose prior to July 1st, the fee has to be based upon the number of square feet in a particular house. So if you have a 3,000 square foot home, it will pay twice the fees of a 1,500 square foot home. There is some logic to that because there is a tie-in. The larger the home, the more people living there, the more benefit there is. So they should pay higher fees. That's number one. Number two, larger homes in general tend to be more expensive than smaller homes. So they can handle the higher fee, because if you can qualify to buy a larger home, you can qualify to pay a slightly higher fee. And the Building Industry Association was very crucial in the state legislature changing the law. So as of July 1st, we have no more one fee for single family, one fee for multifamily. It becomes a per square foot fee depending on the size of the home. So that's something that you can consider doing, or you can just wait till after. You cannot do it, and then the next fee you adopt after July 1st, which may be 5 years from now or 8 years from now, that would have to be based on square footage, since the law is changing as of July 1st, 2022. And then the last thing is evaluating the fee credit options. You are, I guess, trying to build some affordable housing, homes that are below market price. Clearly, if you have a very, very large fee for parks or for anything else, that makes it more difficult to build affordable housing. So the question is, should there be some kind of fee credit or partial waiver? I do want to say one thing about fees that people don't seem to recognize it's really important. When we do these studies are to justify the maximum fee that you can charge. It doesn't mean the city council has to charge that fee. We do work in communities where we come out with a fee level. And for instance, particularly in the old days when retail was the way that local governments generated money, they would say, you know what, we don't really like this fee on retail. Let's charge half as much, or let's phase it in over 3 years. We don't want to charge the full retail rate. We know we need parks, but boy, we need that sales tax. We really want to encourage retail. We don't want them going into the next community. So you'll have city councils able to work with the fee study. You don't have to charge the maximum amount, but you're allowed to charge up to that amount. If you want to charge less, that's fine. Nobody's going to complain, but you can't charge more because you have to go through a new fee justification study, a new set of hearings, a new resolution, and all that to raise the fees to charge more than that. So all the fees we're discussing today are actually the maximum fees you can charge. Based upon our analysis, you could charge less if you decided to. And that may be a factor if you get a park fee that's very, very high, and there's a reason why you have a different goal for the city where you don't want to charge that maximum level. Again, that's a political choice. There's no right or wrong. It's whatever's appropriate for that particular community. Next slide, Kyle. Okay, so the updated land costs, and hopefully you can see it on the screen because I've got people's pictures over this table. But anyway, updating land costs, what we did is we took a look and concentrated more in the last 5 years, and we came up with a cost per acre of $6.5 million per acre. Obviously, that results in a higher fee because we still have to buy the same acreage. It's just we're now saying it's going to cost more. So it resulted in an increase in the fee level of 9.37%. And just looking at the same 4 categories that we had initially in 2021 when these fees were first adopted, the single family residential fee goes from, this is just for the park. This is not, we're not changing the library, we're not changing the community center, just the park component of the fee. Goes up from $57,420 to $62,802. So it's a little bit over $5,000 increase. You can see multifamily goes from $42,500 to $46,500, basically. Commercial industrial per new square foot, $16.83 to $18.41. And then hotel motel goes from $286 to $313. So going up based upon what we see as the more up-to-date price at $6.5 million per acre, comes out with fees ranging from $46,500 for multifamily, $62,800 for single family, and then you can see the dollar figures for commercial, industrial, and hotel motel. So that's the first increase. Next slide. Okay, so in looking at the various categories and looking at the different numbers of employees per square foot, what we did was we differentiated between retail and office so that we now have a retail, an office, an industrial, a hotel, and then an other commercial category. And the idea was that anything that does not under the city zoning ordinances qualify under any of these other 4 categories, retail, office, industrial, or hotel. If you don't qualify under any of those 4, and yet you're non-residential, you would fall into the commercial category, which is an average catch-all category for, as I said, some kind of outlier type of use. So we updated the numbers based upon carrying those 4 categories instead of 1 category. And if you turn the page, next slide. Actually, oh, the numbers go to the next page after that. Okay, I guess we're going to show this when we get to the next page, which is the page that differentiates, that includes all the changes that we put in, that include doing these 4 different categories. But you can see that the retail fee decreased by 41% because the number of employees per square foot for retail was lower than what the average was when we had a combined commercial category. Office increased by 30%. Remember, we talked about 250 square feet per employee. Now it's 190 square feet per employee. That means we have 30% more employees per 1,000 square foot of the building, and that's why the fees got up 30%. Industrial decreased 12%, And then the other commercial is simply the average of all the other non-residential categories. We didn't have an other commercial last time. We did this just to have some category to catch people in. If a builder says, well, I'm not supposed to be retail or office or industrial, what are you going to do with me? We now have something to do with you. We put you in the average category, which is other commercial, and that becomes that particular category now. And I'll show you the exact numbers 2 pages from now. Next page. Okay, frequency of updates. I think I talked to you a little bit about this before. We have a fee going up by a construction cost index or a consumer price index. I believe you guys use construction cost. Kyle, am I correct in this case? Are you online or? I think you use construction cost index, but anyway, it goes up. Obviously, when there's a recession, it doesn't go up very much. During good years, when there's a lot of development going on, it goes up more, but you generally end up somewhere between 2 and 4% per year as an increase in the fee. And it would do that every single year without you having to go back and do a new fee study. But obviously that doesn't keep up with all the needs of the city, particularly if land costs go up more than that. So which is why you want to look at doing a new study. And we're recommending, a lot of our clients do every 5 years, but if you don't want to do it that often, every 8 years is also within the normal range. 5 years to 8 years is the norm that we see around the state. So that would be that particular subject matter. Evaluating single versus multifamily. I think I told you about July 1st being the cutoff date, after which it's going to be a per square foot basis. We can stay with having it just the way we have it now on residential. One number for all single family, one number for all multifamily, which is actually simpler for the city to implement. Having said that, the smaller homes are paying maybe a little bit more than they can afford, and the larger homes maybe a little bit less than they can afford. So if you did break it down on square footage of the building, then you would be able to differentiate and charge maybe more appropriate amounts based on the size and the price and the demand for more park facilities created by a home. And then the options for below market rate units. That's the one that we kind of didn't answer. We're not sure how much you want us to get into that. We can run pro formas and show you what it takes to build an affordable home and you know, how much less, how much easier it is to build an affordable home if you don't have a park fee or if you have a lower park fee. That's a whole issue it's not black and white, it's a lot of gray. And we can get into that more. That's the one issue we kind of didn't deal with at this point, looking for more direction from the council. Are they serious about us really getting into this? Because it can be a complicated issue. Next slide. So here's the numbers that I promised you. And as you can see that the totals go up for single family detached from 62,800 per unit to 69,886 total. So it's almost $70,000 per unit, and that's based on a $6.5 million per acre price for the purchase price of buying an acre of land to put a park on. Multifamily, we've gone up from 46,500 to 51,687. So that's a little bit more than a $5,000 increase. And now we have actually five different categories if we include the other commercial. And you can see that the numbers that we had before we show the numbers if we'd broken it down into 5 categories before. Actually, we don't show. We show what the new numbers are for parks and also for community center and library, and the total numbers come to $11.20 per square foot for retail, $24.53 for office, $16.61 for industrial per square foot. The hotel stays the same, $3.49 per square foot, and the other commercial is $13.96 per square foot. So those would be the numbers that at this point we're recommending to the council based upon the higher sales price of the home, the new categories of non-residential, with each one reflecting the number of employees, updated number of employees per 1,000 square feet in a non-residential building. Next slide. Okay, so our recommendations are, as I just explained, update the land valuation from 5.7 million to 6.5 million, separate out the commercial into these 5 new categories: retail, office, industrial, hotel, and other commercial. We already updated the office density to lower to 190 square feet per employee. So that's already been taken care of. Fee study updated every 5 to 8 years, as I discussed before. And then the question is, we would just stay with, because you guys are used to single family, multifamily, we could just keep it that way for now. I know our other clients who are getting this done before July 1st seem to like to stick with a single family and multifamily on their fees. But as of July 1st, that changes. You do have the option of going ahead, even if you adopt this before July 1st, and making the change to per square foot if you feel it's a wise policy for the city. And then item F was the one where we needed further direction from the city as to how they want to deal with affordable housing, how much a priority is versus parks, because that has a lot to do with it. If parks are that important, you know, then you do one thing. If affordable housing is more important, then you do another, or you come up with a compromise in the middle somewhere. You have a lot of different options, and a lot of this ends up being local policy and what the city council feels is appropriate at this time for the city. And I think that's it for the slides. Kyle, that's it. Thank you so much. Anyway, so that's basically our presentation. We're here to answer any questions. I know there are issues about the land valuations. We can talk about those at length if you'd like, but that's our basic presentation.
Thank you, David, for all of the details and the very rich and dense report, I'd say. A couple of quick announcements. Any members of the public who'd like to speak on this item, please raise your hand and we'll get to you shortly. I'll ask if there's any commissioners that have any clarifying questions before we go to the public. These aren't comments, these are just questions to clarify some of the material that David has presented. Also, if there's any staff members that would like to comment on this before we go to the public. But one quick overview I'd like to make is referring to the city council motion last April, which specifically directed the finance committee and Parks and Rec to look at these 6 items, which DT has reported on. For one of the items, the recommendation on the frequency of the schedule update, that was specifically dictated to or directed to the finance committee. So that isn't something that the Parks and Rec Commission should be considering this evening. So as far as instructions to commissioners and to members of the public want to comment, let's hold off on that subject matter and leave it to finance. Does staff have any comments before we go to the commissioners for clarifying questions? Do any commissioners have any questions before we go to the public? Anne.
Sorry. I really liked the presentation. It was a lot easier to understand than wading through all of the paper that we got in the packet. So I'd like to compliment you and wonder if that could be shared with us as well.
Of course.
Thank you.
I don't like reading through those either, to be honest. So I'm with you 100%.
Thank you. And certainly the commissioners who were here last February when this was presented the first time around have a distinct advantage over the new commissioners who are trying to absorb this for the first time. Commissioner Kleinhaus, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. And I know I'm new to this commission, so you may have discussed some of this before. But I know that housing laws and land use laws are a moving target. With SB 9 and with ADUs, how do you define a single family residential? And what do you do with SB 9 if somebody has 4 units plus an ADU? Where does that fall?
Okay, so I've had this question asked before, and each city's been different. We've had cities that are, I'm just telling you, they're trying to encourage affordable housing, and they tell us to waive the fee on an ADU, that the single family home that was there to begin with paid the fee and that the ADU doesn't have to. There are other communities that say, you know what, it's a detached home, it's separate, it's on the same lot, but it is detached, and therefore we can treat it as a single family detached home, obviously with very small square footage. So when you're dealing with square footage, it wouldn't be paying as much. In this case, because your fees are pretty high per single family home, the council may decide to just waive it or to charge a much lower amount based on the fact that the typical ADU is, you know, 1/6 the size of a typical single family home or something along those lines. So there's no law one way or the other on it. It's a matter of what your council decides to do. We did not deal with it in this particular study in particular, but we could call that out if you guys wanted and make that something separate. SB 9 is a brand new law, so it's not something that's been around for a long time. So it's the first time we've had to deal with it in quantity. Usually as ADU, there's a few here, a few there. Now we're getting a real influx in a lot of communities. So it's changed the atmosphere.
Thank you. I just want to clarify that this is really just a time for clarifying questions from the commissioners. If you have questions or comments that are on deeper questions, we'll go to that as discussion, a part of our action after hearing from the public. So I see that Commissioner Freeman's hand is going to save his question and comment for later. Now we'll look to members of the public to comment. And I see that we have at least one member of the public who'd like to comment. Alam, could you offer 3 minutes to the speaker?
Yes, I can. We have one request. This is Keith Rectal.
Thank you, and welcome to former chair and former commissioner, Parks and Rec Commissioner Rectal.
Yes, you can't get rid of me. It's good to be back. As you know, parks and recreation are important parts of Palo Alto's quality of life, and RENA is going to require the city to add over 6,000 new housing units over the next 8 years. And this Nexus study is crucial to ensure that these new neighbors have the same access to parks and recreation that the rest of the city enjoys. Yeah, I do also agree that I think David did do a good presentation. I enjoyed it and was very informative. But my biggest complaint is that the study only looks at vacant parcels. And that's not representative of the land that we would purchase for park acquisition. And the fact that this next study examines the wrong properties is clear from its land valuation of $6.5 million an acre. And that sounds like a lot of money, but in Palo Alto real estate, it isn't. And that's equivalent of buying an empty residential lot for $900,000. And that just doesn't happen. It's much more expensive than that. So the $6.5 million per acre is just insufficient if we want to buy parkland. As a point of reference, 5 years ago, in my neighborhood, a tear down near the railroad tracks, so it's not a great location, sold for $13 million an acre. And that was 5 years ago, South Palo Alto, and that's still double what the Nexus study is assuming. And North Palo Alto is even more expensive. So again, this $6.5 million an acre is it's insufficient. Considering our housing shortage in the area, it's more likely that parkland acquisition will be commercial property, which is even more expensive than residential property. An example is 3 years ago, the old Pizza Chicago site in El Camino. It was sold as a tear down, so the price is just for the land, $21 million an acre. And the county now assesses this empty lot at over $22 million an acre. That's 3.5 times what the Nexus study is assuming. And so that's for parkland. But in addition to city parklands, we also have open space. The Nexus study values our open space, like Foothills Preserve, at about $65,000 per acre. Our last open space acquisition was 20 years ago when the Bressler addition to Astrodero Preserve, and that cost $274,000 per acre. So even just ignoring inflation, that's 4.2 times the value assumed by this Nexus study. So we really have to value these assets. And it's important that the Nexus study correctly values the assets of the open space. And this isn't just an academic exercise. When North Ventura went to council last month, the city staff concluded that our park impact fees were insufficient to fund the needed parks in the area. And that means the new residents in North Ventura will not be receiving their fair share of parks unless we accurately update our impact fees. And now with the city is stretched financially with pandemic financial issues, and we have this huge unfunded mandate for affordable housing. The city's general fund does not have the cash flow to subsidize new parks. These impact fees must be updated to realistically reflect the true cost of park acquisition. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. And I don't see any other hands up from members of the public. So now we'll move on to commissioner comments. Before we do that, I'd like to try to frame this item a little bit to help clarify what the role of our commission is this evening as we consider this action. Appreciate the background information that David provided to us. And this did, as he mentioned, this did come to Parks and Rec Commission last February, where it was recommended to be approved by a vote of 5-2. Commissioner Rectal and myself voted against that, and some of the reasons for that were some of the items that City Council ended up following up on and asking for more information on that we're discussing this evening. And the difference that was happening then versus now is the fee structure had not been updated in many years, and so even though the methodology in determining some of the fees may have been flawed, it was very important to get the updates in place that were recommended as a step moving forward. This is a different type of item that the commission takes on. It's not the typical park, open space, and recreation item that usually comes before us, but it is very important for us nonetheless, because it's a critical subject as it impacts funding for everything we do potentially, and particularly moving down the road as our community increases in population. And I'd just like to highlight a couple of things that David mentioned. Public fees are collected and they're available for targeted uses, and so the park fees that are contributed are targeted for the parks. They don't go into the general fund. Also, the studies justify the maximum fee that we're allowed to collect. And one way of looking at this is we want to make sure that we're not limiting our fee structure improperly. So we're not specifying what the fee will be, but we're setting what the ceiling will be. With that, I'd like to open this up to members of the commission to comment further. Actually, one more question I have for staff and potentially for Councilmember Du Bois on this is where we go with this if we did not recommend, if we do not make a recommendation to accept the study as it is, and we suggest something different, would this study, is the potential that this study would be revised and would come back to the Parks and Recreation Commission before going to Finance Committee, or would this information be taken into consideration before going to Finance but not come back to us, or go to City Council? I'm just kind of trying to understand what the timeline is that we're discussing as we try to decide how to move forward this evening. I don't know if Councilmember Du Bois is also the chair of the Finance Committee, so he may have some specific insight on that.
If I understand, sorry, excuse me. If I understand what you're asking, you're saying maybe Darren has an idea as well, but what would be the process of either accepting or not accepting? Yes,
it seems clear that if we accept the recommendation in front of us, then it goes to Finance to review. If we don't accept it or recommend an alternative, what would the process be? And what are the implications?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the process would be. I think Mr. Rectal's comments were interesting. I think, and again, I'm just speaking from the council discussion. I think there was a lot of concern about the land value, and appreciate David's update. But again, you know, there is a seeming disconnect, and I'm really interested in your discussion tonight. You know, if I could buy an acre of land for $6.5 million, I think I would do it. So I think if you can save council time, that's going to be the most useful. If it gets to council and we have the same question, then council's going to be kind of stuck as well. So that's my 2 cents.
Yep. Thank you, Director O'Kane. Thanks for joining us. Would you like to comment?
Sure, thank you. I'm Kristen O'Kane with Community Services. I think what we could do is hear the commission's comments tonight, and since I believe this is an action, correct? Yes. You could make that whatever action seems appropriate and we could present that to the Finance Committee, that may mean some additional work between now and Finance Committee that could present some additional information for them to make their recommendation. So I don't think we necessarily have to come back to PRC, but I think whatever the PRC's input and recommendation is, we could then apply that to our Finance Committee presentation.
Thank you, and I do know that the council's council's motion last April was requesting to return to council in the following fiscal year, which we're currently now in, and which ends on June 30th. So that's the time constraint that we're looking to meet. Any further questions or clarifications before we move on to commissioner comments finally? Okay, is there any commissioner that would like to start off? Okay, perhaps we could start with Commissioner Brown.
Commissioner Freeman has his hand up.
I'm sorry?
Commissioner Freeman.
I'm going back and forth.
No, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, David, for a very good understanding of in that presentation, especially being sort of a newbie here and being the first to hear about this. But one question is how has COVID, I mean, a lot of this I assume was done sort of with how COVID has changed things for across all industries, and the fact that a lot of organizations or a lot of companies are going with kind of a hybrid model, and that's probably going to last for 3 to 5 or longer. And so, you know, the way things were are probably going to be a lot different going forward. So did your organization sort of take a lot of that into consideration when you're looking at the recommendation of how often you'll revisit fees, and how, you know, companies who might not be increasing their real estate footprint as a result of organizations sort of downsizing their in-house employees and giving people an option to work remotely no matter where they are. So was that kind of taken into consideration as you're building your plans or adjusting?
All right, so I'd love to, first of all, it's a great question. It is not the first time I've been asked this question. There are other brilliant people like you who asked this, and we don't have a solid answer. To be honest with you, we're using data that was basically pre-pandemic. We don't know. I mean, we don't have an office ourselves. We're working out of an executive suite, 55 people working out of their houses. So we're obviously in a situation where we're not occupying any offices. I do know some of the latest numbers we've seen on industrial, as Amazon and other firms are putting in more high-tech material, and we're using 300 square feet per industrial worker, which is the number that is correct for Palos Verdes, not Palos Verdes, your community, I just drew a blank on it, Palo Alto, that we actually had the number of employees working in Palo Alto in industrial, and we had the number of square feet of industrial development, and we had 300 square feet per employee. I know that the new number now that's used by Amazon is 1,200 square feet per employee because they have so much mechanization going on. I happen to know that because we just did a study for the city of San Bernardino on that. So obviously the 300 isn't going to apply anymore, but we use 300 for your study. So those adjustments are ones that will have to be made at some point in the future. Everything is changing, everything is different, and we do not consider that in our study to date because we don't know what the new model is going to be, is what it boils down to. So anyway.
Any more questions, Nellis?
No, that was actually a good, yeah, it's kind of hard to try and predict the future. A lot of companies don't necessarily know what the future is going to be. And but I do think that's going to be there's already starting to be a reduction in organizations acquiring new space and probably giving up space at some point in time.
Right, no question. So, no question about that at all.
Yeah. That's it for me. Thank you. Thank you for your response.
Thank you. Commissioner Cribbs, would you like to go next?
Well, yes, I'm really glad that Commissioner Freeman asked that question, because as I was listening to the presentation, David, I was thinking about, okay, so how does this reflect the effect that COVID has had over the last 2 years, and what are the projections for the future? So if I understood you right, the data that you're using to make these decisions is data that's from pre-COVID era. Is that?
Yes, we use 2018 census data, which is the commercial census that figures that tells you how many employees there are in each industry as of 2018. So it's only 3-4 years old, but that's the numbers we have. A number of employed persons in each of the industries, industrial versus retail versus office. And then we have the square footage that actually exists in your city, which is up to date, how many square feet there are. And we simply did the division and came out with the number of square feet per employee. And that's why we lowered the number for office from 250 square feet per employee to 190. What is it going to be from now on? Well, just think, if we ever go back to an office, and right now all the employees like working from home, so we haven't done anything with it yet, but we'd be in a hybrid situation where people would come in some days, but not other days. I suspect we're going to have a lot of empty space sitting there a lot of the time. So while we could say we have 55 employees and so many square feet, how many of them come in every day and therefore would be using the local parks or the roads or the sewer or the water? That's all going to be changing. It's very difficult to predict exactly where we're going to be going.
Sure.
And what's nice is that we get sued, we've got numbers we can show. And that's the thing you're always scared of. The building industry does like to sue on these studies. That's one of their things. So anyway.
I understand, and I understand it's hard to predict the future. I'm just interested in whether or not you and your company will be looking at this more closely, because this is such a new thing coming out of COVID. So.
Yeah, no, we will definitely have to. And I'm sure somebody will sue over that particular issue at some point. We've been very fortunate. We've been doing these since 1989. We've never been sued, but the world now is changing and it's more litigious in this particular area. So very, very good points by both of you, though.
Well, thank you for that. And then I just would like to add, Chair, that I continue to think that the land valuation is too low, given the cost of land in Palo Alto, and because our responsibility on this commission is to look for ways to get more parks, especially in the underserved part of Palo Alto, which is the Ventura area, that I'm anxious that we set it at 6, when I don't know what it should be, but as Commissioner Freeman, I think, said, he wouldn't mind buying a acre of land in Palo Alto at the cost that you said it was. So anyhow, from a personal perspective, I'm concerned that we're low.
Right. Well, no, maybe you should comment. Mr. Rectal's, or ex-Commissioner Rectal's points were all very, very well taken. What we could do, and I already discussed this with Kyle because we knew this was going to come up, is we could go out and get every single sale of every single parcel over the last 12 months and come out with a per acre cost, irrespective of whether it has a building on it or not. Most have buildings on them, whether it's old industrial, brand new single family home, whatever. We could have a number, and that would be supportable in court because it would be every single sale. And as Mr. Rectal says, you may build a park by knocking down a couple single family homes and building a park because there's no vacant land and you have no choice in the matter, at which point his point is well taken. We'd have to pay for the land as well as the building on top of the land. So we can do that. And then it really becomes a political football for the city council, because they have to consider, here's the parks fee, we need parks. What other priorities does the city have in terms of its needs? Oh, housing, affordable housing. Well, as you can see, our fee was $64,504 per unit as of 2022, as of this fiscal year for single family home. If you doubled from 6.5 to 13 million, just to make it simple, you'd have $130,000 per unit park fee. So that's in addition to all the other fees. How does that affect other city policies? And that's the city council that has to make up their mind. They can say, well, you know what? Right now we want more housing, so we're not going to charge the maximum 130,000, but we'll move to that in 2 years. there's a lot of flexibility on their part, but the bottom line is it's expensive to buy land in the city. And if you are going to buy land in the city, Mr. Rectal is right. You're going to have to pay through the nose. That's a technical term, but anyway, and you have to be cognizant of that when you come up with your fee program. One other thing I want to say, and I'm just talking out loud for better or for worse. So I've obviously been with a lot of other cities doing these kinds of studies. We finished one in Costa Mesa a couple of years ago, and they decided, and this is just their city, so they decided to take the money that they're collecting for land and for improvements and to take certain parks they have that are very undeveloped, don't have any, no tot lots, no ball fields, no whatever, take the money and put it into existing land to make it more usable, because they thought that was the most effective use of the fee money, to make parks available to people today based on the fact that they have park space that is not really used very efficiently. The other side of that is if you do that, then you're not buying the new land, and the new land ain't going to get cheaper. It's going to get more expensive. So you're limiting yourself as to how many parks you have. But it's not a crazy idea, because you are using the land more efficiently and you're using the money more efficiently, and you're building facilities that existing people can use that aren't used right now. One thing is in Irvine, they did that. They did a soccer field with 12 soccer fields in one place on what was bare land, because they decided it would be more useful for AYSO and all the different soccer leagues. That is an option the council has, not one they may want to use, but it is something that should be out there on the smorgasbord of things you can do with this money. That's another one that you can do, you know. So you've got all these different options, and case by case basis, you look at every single piece of land that you need to buy, and you decide if it's good to go with it or not, and what kind of fees you need to purchase that kind of land is why the city council has to come up with a number that works for their entire program, their entire development, their entire land use controls program, including building enough parks. So those are all factors.
Thank you. So our job at the commission is easy.
Yeah. Right? Well, the council's got to make the decisions, and they get voted in or out.
No, what I was meaning is our recommendation is easy.
Yeah. Oh, I guess so. That's you can go with the high numbers you want, because that's all that matters. That's all you have to care about. And again, we can come up with a high number. All we have to do is take every sale for the last 12 months and say we're using developed property, because if you were going to build a park, you'd have to buy a piece of developed property. Maybe you wouldn't buy the most expensive single family home. You'd buy ones that are, you know, maybe need to be rebuilt or scraped or whatever it is. But nonetheless, Mr. Rectal is correct in saying that is, in your case, a factor. Maybe not in other cities, but in the case of Palo Alto, definitely. So
thank you very much.
I'm doing a lot of work for Paso Robles, and that name keeps popping up in my head, and it's Palo Alto. They both start with P, I guess, and whatever. Anyway, sorry.
Thank you. Are you finished, Ann?
I am finished, yes.
Okay.
Thank you for now.
And Shawnee or Mandy, would one of you like to speak next?
Sure. I have a quick question, and then I'm going to circle back to that same topic, but I'll give you a break. The administration costs of 5% to account for city staff time, is that an industry standard, or did you actually take a look at the staff time required in the city of Palo Alto?
Yeah, that's an industry standard. It's used to administer the fee program. The cost of actually buying the parks and all that, that's all considered, the cost of doing the improvements and all that, that's considered in those costs. The 5% is for actually administering the program, which means the building permit people have to make sure they collect the money, put it in the right account, and do all that. And that's pretty much a standard. We use 5% for every city we work with. So
that's helpful. And then going back, do you know of any cities that have gone through the developed land route that is sort of being discussed here? And I know you said that it was legally defensible if we were to have the 12 months of data, but right. If you do know of any cities that have pursued that route, do you know if they have been challenged by the building industry, to your knowledge?
No, they haven't. So what's happening now, this is a long story, but AB 602, have you guys heard about that at all? It's the one I did mention where as of July 1st, you're going to have to start charging per square foot of building on residential unless you adopt it before then. It also has a rule saying that the quality of parks, or the quality of whatever infrastructure you're building with the fee program, cannot be higher than the existing level. And there's been no courts have looked at this yet. It's a brand new law. It started January 1st. So the fear would be that developers coming in looking for something to sue over will now say that you've increased the quality of parks, the location of parks, the amount you're putting into parks compared to what the existing folks paid. The rationale for that is we have to do it. We want to build parks. We're just trying to build the same parks we had before. It just costs more now than it did before. And that's why the fee is so much higher. But it's anticipated that language was put in there, and it's very ambiguous intentionally to make those of us who do these studies worry about, well, how's somebody going to look at this? And are they going to say we've stepped up the level of service? They'll be looking for things like that. So I think that might be the issue. I don't know if anybody, I'm just trying to think of who's actually gone out and bought, mostly they buy vacant land. It's very unusual. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Like some cities will do something where they'll go to an area where there's low-income housing or industrial buildings that are going to be torn down. And so there has been some of that, but nobody's gone to beautiful single-family neighborhoods and said, we're going to take down these 2 houses and build new parks. That's something that I have not seen. I don't think it happens often. Having said that, it's a brave new world out there. And so we'll see what happens this time around. You could be the first, or you could be just one of many that do it. I have not seen it yet though. So.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kleinhaus. Shauna, you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the explanation about AB 602. I think it helped me understand why the urgency, because it makes complete sense to me to charge by square foot. What we see is larger and larger and larger buildings on small lots. And I would generally want to see smaller homes. They're more sustainable. They leave some land for trees and vegetation and for kids to play. So I think it makes more sense, but I understand that this ambiguity about what does it mean that you can't provide better parks than what there already are in the community can really make it difficult. And I would love to know more about that. I don't know if that's something that is in our purview to understand a little more, whether adhering to our Parks and Recreation or general plan covers us for that. And I don't know the answer, and maybe somebody can explain. But the other thing I wanted to say is that I agree with former Chair Rectal and the other commissioners here who said that the valuation of land is really not realistic or pragmatic, and it should be. And in terms of land available occasionally in Palo Alto, there was a church that sold some of its land to put 4 gigantic homes, and that land was available for sale from the church for a while. So there are opportunities where sort of built environment is still available. It wasn't homes on it, but it was land that they were using. So I think opportunities occasionally arise, and when they do, we should have the funds to take advantage of an opportunity. And currently, the valuation that you provided will not afford us that.
I understand.
Yep.
I agree with you, by the way, on the per square foot. I think a smaller home should pay less, larger home should pay more. I think that's, we've done that with school fees ever since 1990, but this is the first time it's been enforced on other types of fees. So that is something that is, I think is appropriate. I agree with you on that, but until July 1st, it's not the law, so.
Yeah, but so maybe staff or somebody can explain. Again, I'm new, so maybe I'm asking questions that don't belong in this discussion, but why don't we just wait and do something else?
Well, you can do it by square foot now. If you, now I don't know, Mr. Chairman, whether this is in your purview as the Parks and Rec Commission, but you can say we think it should be per square foot, I guess. I don't know if that's something you're supposed to regulate, that you think that's a better idea. By the way, just so you know, we did the calculations and it comes out to about $35 per square foot of building. So 2,000 square foot building would be, if you mix single family, multifamily together, 2,000 square foot building would be $70,000 at the $35. Now, if we went up to 13 million an acre, and again, I don't know that we will, but if we went up to that high, then we'd be talking about double that, which would be $70 per square foot. So a 2,000 square foot home then would be $140,000 would be the park fee. So just to give you an order of magnitude to think about, that's what would happen if we doubled it.
That's very helpful information. Any further questions, Shani?
No, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I want to thank you for leading us in this frank and open discussion. It's been very helpful and refreshing on a certain level.
Glad you didn't say confusing, because I was not just kidding. Anyway.
Oh, that's coming next now.
Yeah.
No. Regarding the updated land acquisition cost, along with everyone else, it doesn't pass the sniff test for me, and I'm sure that if an acre of land came up for 6.5 million, it wouldn't make it to market before getting snapped up. The question I have is roughly how many data points did you have to use in reaching the 6.5 million number? And I think and we're talking about open lots that are sold in Palo Alto, which doesn't seem like a very large number.
Well, over 10 years, we had quite a number of them, but when we went back to 5 years, we didn't have as many. I know we went back 2 years and we had 3, so that didn't seem very good. So although the last 2 years have been different than the 3 years before it, so it's not like it doesn't. I don't know whether, Kyle, are you online? I don't remember how many data points you had for the 5 year. I know you had plenty for the 10 year because I saw your whole list, but I know there were only 3 for the 2 year, and I don't know how many there were for the 5 year. But again, they're not very vacant, and so maybe you have outliers. Maybe you have a particularly bad piece of land that came out. That was in our list. It's just a matter of what you take a look at. And again, we could pick up every sale for the last 12 months and just come up with an average based on that period. Something on it or not on it, and then perhaps the building industry could argue that these numbers are too high, and it's not fair to be using land that was sold for a $40 million house as part of your data points. And would that be right or not? It depends on what the judge says, I guess. But
it's safe to say that your data set is small and not necessarily
it's very small,
not necessarily representative.
No.
It seems like a halfway point between going to all sales, whether they include structures or not, which is most sales, would be to try to glean data on tear downs. So there are a number of sales in the city where particularly often a developer will purchase the land, tears down the house and the existing improvement and builds a new improvement from scratch. And that seems like a pretty realistic equivalent of a vacant lot sale as well. And in some cases, the property may be worth even more than the sale price because they have to pay for tear down prices. So that I don't know if it seems like that would be something very, very useful.
Yeah, and that would be definitely less than the fancy single family home, that's for sure. So
right.
Yeah, we'd have to probably work with the city, Sarah, to kind of figure out which lots those are, because we have information on the sales prices and the location. I'm not sure. Kyle does all that work. I'm not sure whether we would know whether it was a tear down or not, but we could possibly find out from the city where people pull building permits to demolish units and just go directly to those. And we do have the sales price of every single lot. We just don't necessarily know what was on it. We know there's an improvement on it or not, but we don't know if it was a tear down or not. So
no, I think it's the right direction to look.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point.
Also, I think as a commission, we should be focusing on determining the maximum fee limit and let city council decide what fee is appropriate, balancing the needs of the community. And looking at the BMR discussion, the last point that didn't really get much attention, you're kind of looking for feedback on how to move forward with. certainly our community wants to encourage more true BMR housing, below market rate housing. And if the ceiling for impact fees is set high enough, then council can balance the priorities between housing and parks, which are both important priorities for our community. But to me, our role as the commission is not to artificially lower that ceiling that they can be potentially working with, so they can make trade-offs. I really like what you've done with the differentiated fees instead of separating it out to different areas. That makes sense. A question I have regarding that is, does the projected net total remain the same across the various fees, across the various differentiated development types?
Yeah, well, let's see. They differed. I think there was a page in there that showed that some of them went up, and so you're talking about the non-residential now, right?
Yes. So some went up, some went down. But
exactly right. Overall, it would be the same amount because we used the same. An employee was still worth the same number of residents. Now, see, Kyle, were there more employees this way? Because if we lowered the number. If we lower the square footage per employee like we did for office, we'll be getting more money out of office than we had before. So that would be higher. But then you did the opposite with retail. I'm assuming we probably ended up with approximately the same amounts because some went up and some went down. The only exception being that we went up 9.7% because we increased the price of the land from 5.7 million per acre to 6.5 million. So in general, there'd be a 9.5% increase. But other than that, I would say the non-residential, if you average them out, would be the same as it was before, other than the 9.5% rise, I believe. Kyle, is there any way you can get on to talk, or is it just, I know I keep talking to this person and maybe she's not really there. I don't know.
I'm on, David.
Oh, okay. Hey, Kyle, what do you think? Was the average about the same at the end?
So you're saying if we just combine the total fees for commercial, industrial, and hotel motel, so what it was previously,
yes,
versus combining the total fees for when everything's broken out.
Right.
When we break everything out, it actually does increase the total fee load for non-residential. Let's see.
By more than 9.5%, by more than 9.5, because 9.5 you're going to get automatically anyway from the 5.7 to the 6.5. You think it was because the number of employees became greater because of the new numbers we used, right?
The number of employees, well, I'm trying to.
I know office is higher. I just wonder some are lower. So if some are lower, so we probably have to get back to you and calculate that all out and see. But some are high. I know office is higher, so it's definitely more money than it was. I know retail is lower. It's definitely less money than it was. Do the two equal each other in terms of?
Do they offset? And part of the equation is we're projecting how many of each type of development, new development there will be, and that's based on historical data, and we don't know that it'll be exactly the same moving forward, particularly in this new environment. But I would suspect that the finance committee and city council will be even more interested in understanding what the net change in collected fees would be based on this differentiated structure that you're suggesting.
Okay, so the total amount collected from non-residential, the question is that 9.5% more than it was before, which is what it should be, Kyle? Or would it be different because the difference in densities per employee were such that we wound up with more money or less money than we would have had before? That's the question.
We can add a slide for the next presentation that clarifies sort of the changes there and why there was an increase.
Okay.
And it's something I'd like to spend a little more time on so I can explain it
okay.
in a little less
Thank you.
way.
Just real quickly, could you give some examples of the other developments? So what are just a couple quick ideas so we can picture it in our mind a little bit better?
For other commercial, I know the city had mentioned like a daycare center was an example of something that may not fall under one of the other four categories. I'm not sure, Sarah, if they had specified any other types of businesses, but that was the main one that they had mentioned.
Great.
Yeah, I think also senior living, people always ask me about senior living. Where does that go? It's not exactly residential, but it's not exactly non-residential either. So that might be one that gets caught in there, I'm guessing.
Thank you. Councilmember Du Bois, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I think it was a really interesting conversation. I think the questions about like the methodology used to calculate the land value are important. And just hearing that there were very few data points, again, I think possibly when you come to finance committee, if you could look at a larger data set like the tear downs, that would make a lot of sense, because again, I think you're going to get a lot of the same questions, and it would save us all time if we had some more information, on a different approach.
Oh, great. Yeah, we'd love to give better answers on that one. But Kyle apologized to me about 5 times during the week saying I can't come up with more data. So we understand. I'm glad we have some direction. Somebody's told us to do something different. So now we get to do it. So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have follow-up questions? Commissioner Freeman.
Yeah, I just have one. And that is, when we're talking tear downs, were you just talking about residential and not necessarily commercial? Because I've seen a number of commercial tear downs. I don't know if that would be, those are considered sort of like new acquisitions.
So, yeah, I'd like to do both. Again, I've had this argument before. Well, we're not going to build a park in an industrial area. Well, depends. If you're talking tennis courts, you're talking soccer fields where everybody goes to them. And there's industrial areas and there's industrial areas right next to residential. I would like to include both, because I can't say for sure you're only go to the expensive single family areas to build a park. There's all kinds of other reasons to build them in other areas. So I'd like to use everything. What we'll do, we'll tell you what, we'll differentiate industrial from residential. So we'll have 2 separate numbers, then we'll have a blended number. And that way we've got more information. And I think you guys gave us a good cover for not going to the 20 million per acre number, which will create a fee that's so high, I think it's probably unreasonable. So I think using that criteria with the tear down, if we can find enough of them over the last 5 years, that would be helpful. Again, I'd rather have them over the last 60 days, but that's not realistic. So we'll see what we've got and bring it back, I guess.
Yeah, and I think one last point would be the usage of the parks. When we looked at, in the early part of your discussion was whether residential more usage versus commercial. I think with kind of the hybrid model that a lot of organizations are going to, where people are going to have sort of more free time, being able to sort of do that work balance between how much work they're going to do at home and getting out and taking the kids to the park or going to the park. What used to be a work day, now you've got more time to do that.
That's a good point.
So it could be that equation will change, and how long, who knows?
Right.
But
no, you're right. That's another thing that's going to change. So it's not. I know I always talk about this. Our office where we were before was in Newport Beach, right next to this bay, and we had all these runners. And I swear they stayed with us longer because they used to go running every lunch to this beautiful bay with wildlife and birds and all that stuff. And it was really a plus. So to say non-residential doesn't benefit is really not true. But whether it benefits as much as a subdivision, single family residential area, that's maybe not quite as much, but it certainly benefits. So.
Thank you. I think that's heading down the right direction, particularly given the distance between commercial, industrial, and residential land in Palo Alto is not very far.
Great.
It blends pretty quickly. Any other follow-up questions from commissioners? And then we'll look to make a motion for the action that we have in front of us. Okay. Shawnee, you're trying to say something? Yes.
I can try and make a motion, but I'll need help because I've never done it before.
Okay, would you like to try to make a motion?
All right, so I have 2 pieces to this, so help me if I go somewhere like off track. One is to accept the recommended fees for non-residential categories in items B and C. But the PRC recommends further review of land valuation costs based on realistic considerations for acquiring land in Palo Alto for residential fees. So further, the further evaluation, including industrial, residential, and blended, and tear down properties if available. And this may be a little confusing, but that's kind of as far as I got on that. And then the second part is to have the fee calculation based on two different things for residential properties. One, per square foot, and two, per unit, as you have it now. So what you have now is one alternative. The other one is to look at equivalent calculation per square foot.
Okay, so let me see if I can understand what you're trying to suggest and figure out how we can make that a little more succinct. So I think the approach we want to take is that we're going to be recommending most of the, I think we're recommending everything, you're saying recommend everything except the updated land acquisition costs. The question I do have is you're saying you're accepting commercial but not residential. So are you saying that
for the land valuation, I'm not sure Mr. Tausig provided that they can do a new valuation calculation based on industrial, residential, and blended.
Okay, so I think maybe a way to phrase that would accept the recommendation for points B, C, E, and F. I mentioned before that I don't think we're commenting on D. And then with respect to the updated land acquisition, recommend further review of the land valuation costs
based on realistic considerations for acquiring land in Palo Alto, including industrial, residential, and blended is what the consultant provided, but I don't know if that's what we need. Maybe we could just leave it open.
Yeah, our plan was to do industrial with tear downs, residential with tear downs, and then take the two and blend them together to give you an average cost of an acre. I don't know, it probably will be less than the 12 million, but it would be more than the 6.5 because we wouldn't be looking at bare land. We will need help from the city though in determining which particular lots ended up having tear downs. Probably the building department would have a record of that for the last few years, and we would go to just those. I mean, hopefully we'll have 20 data points. I don't know that we will, but hopefully we will. And that was what we would come back with. So you'd have a land cost that is for land with tear down on it. And if it's not high enough, then you can say, you know what, that doesn't reflect what we really have to face because you only got 20 of those over the last 5 years. When we go build a park, we're not going to wait for one of those 20. We're going to want to move more quickly. And, you know, therefore we need a higher amount. But again, it's all a matter of balance. This particular goal, which is more parks, with everything else the city council wants to achieve, and how to do that all at once is, you know, the great part.
Yeah.
Okay, so would it work, just so we can rephrase this so we have something that we can look for a second on for your motion. PRC recommends further review of land valuation costs based on
the consideration of acquiring land in Palo Alto.
And then we can say particularly considering residential and commercial tear down acquisition data.
Yeah. And then I still was looking for the providing the fee calculation.
Right. So and in addition, so offer. So you're looking to offer alternative data on per unit and square footage.
Right, because I think that that after July, the square footage is required with that disclaimer, but before July, you can adopt it without it.
Yes. Okay, so rather than getting into explaining the motion, let's try to clarify what the motion is, and then we can
to provide the calculations per square foot and per in the way that they've provided it to us now, and in addition per square foot.
Got it.
For residential.
Darren, are you working on something?
This all makes sense to me totally. So, and what we're going to do is we're going to go out and get this new number on the cost of land and do everything you just said here with that, and then you guys can reject it a second time, and then we'll come back again. Whatever. Anyway,
Darren, do you have something you could share that articulates this?
Working on it, Chair. Not sure I quite got everything, but here's a starter. You can see that.
Calculation based on both.
Hey, that's good. It's just per unit is the existing methodology, but that's fine.
Based on both square footage and the existing per unit methodology.
Perfect.
Thank you for the help. It's the first time I do this.
And then further review of the land valuation costs.
Yeah.
Oh, so I've got this part here. Is that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's right there.
That's a separate bullet, I guess.
Separate bullet.
Yep.
Is the word acquisition important here? Land acquisition? If not, then fine.
I know what you mean, so that part's good. But
okay, and I have I don't know. I think this is okay, but I'm a little hesitant. What if there is no tear down data?
I think we know that there have been tear downs.
Has to be.
Yes.
But there'll be some. It's a good point. There may not be enough of them. We'll see exactly how many there are. And then we'll talk to Sarah and her team and decide if they're.
I think what I'm looking for is something that is not exclusive the tear down data, but including the tear down data.
Yeah. So I think it was further study on land valuation costs.
Yeah.
Based on pragmatic considerations for acquiring land.
Acquiring land and considering residential. So that's kind of subset, but not the only thing.
Including, you can get rid of considering, I guess, saying including.
Yeah.
Commissioner Cribbs.
Do we want to say that the commission agrees, or the commissioners agree that the land valuation should be higher, or do we all agree, or do we not? Or I'm worried if we don't say it should be higher, that it'll just be a number.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I think we're all in agreement on that.
I'll just add that I am in agreement, but I do think that it should be rooted in data. And if we don't have the number of properties or anything that we have to actually defend it, it opens up the city to risk moving forward with a higher number without the numbers to back it up.
That's a great point. Yeah. Excellent.
Thank you for that. Mandy, that's a really good addition. It should include the data points.
So further study doesn't include the data points?
We have a table that has our data points, and we'll just put it in the actual presentation next time. So you'll see exactly how many we have and exactly what the numbers were. I'm just hoping that we can get 20 of them over the last 5 years. And even the last 5 years, the last 2 years are different than the 3 years before that.
So how about if we added to the first part of the recommendation, the Parks and Recreation Commission, somewhere to the point that Commissioner Cribbs brought up, believes that the valuations for land acquisitions are low and recommends. So in the first section, the first sentence, there, that the Parks and Recreation Commission believes that the valuations of land acquisition in Palo Alto is low and recommends that the finance. Okay, so that kind of puts that we believe it's low. And then in the second bullet, further study on land acquisition based on pragmatic considerations of acquiring land. And including, so it's not only, I find, So if there are no, can't find enough tear downs, we still have some data. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Oh, I think we're covered without adding and. I think we're looking for further study, and that's one area that this further study would include.
All right.
Looking at this, I'm not sure that we are recommending that the Finance Committee approve the impact fee updates, because we're specifically suggesting that the data based on the impact fee updates it needs to be revised.
Yeah.
You can say approve the methodologies utilized to update points B, C, and E.
Yep.
Just the methodology, that's all you're approving.
Yes. And as I look at this, the letters are actually, we should be using numbers instead of letters because the numbers are what the Nexus study suggests. So 2, 3, and 5.
Oh, I see on the last page.
Yeah. And no comment, 2, 3, and 5, and no comment on 4.
Right.
So what's F? Now it's 2, 3, 5, and F.
No, well, there was no recommendation regarding F.
Oh.
Two, 3, and 5. And I think it makes more sense to just split this out into two items. I think they can say the Parks and Rec Commission recommends the approval of the methodology of the Nexus study period, or as found in the, so omit the impact and impact fee updates. And go ahead and also add the parenthetical, no comment on 4 after 5. And then the second point would be if we want to make a statement about believing that the land evaluation is low.
Commissioner Cribbs, do you want to see that there still?
Or Commissioner Brown?
Oh.
Or should we just say that the Parks and Rec Commission recommends further study on land evaluation costs, etc.?
I do think that it would be good to say that we believe that the land evaluation costs are low. And
so Darren, I guess you can go with, sorry, on the structural side of things. So Shawnee's in favor of including that. I'm looking for, as we work as a group to develop the motion, that everyone will support. Do others feel that we should include that or not?
Commissioner Cribbs suggested it. I don't know about the others.
And I can't see everybody's hands, so if you want to say something, please go ahead.
I think it makes more sense in the land valuation costs to just add pragmatic consideration for acquiring land. I think that could be a little bit more explicitly stated. Something saying costs based on the development opportunities in Palo Alto. I don't know that we could say appears low, but I'm just worried about putting something in that we don't necessarily have the data to back up, because we haven't seen what the tear down data looks like. And so I just worry about having that sort of is low statement in there personally, but I may be wrong in that.
I tend to agree with you on that. I'm interested in hearing from Commissioner Cribbs and Commissioner Freeman.
Yeah, I mean, when I see something like that, I'm thinking, where's the data to back that up? And that would be a fair question. What does that really mean? So I would go with leaving it out unless, we're going to have something to back it up in the future or to support it.
Okay, well, let's leave it out for now. Darren, can I suggest up at the top after recommends, just go with a colon, and then we'll bullet the 2 recommendations or whatever. Yeah, sure. Recommends, we can get rid of that at the beginning. Recommends.
Chair, would you like to say recommends the contractor provide fee calculation based on?
We could say, what if we just said recommend review or consideration of fee calculation based on both?
Presentation of fee calculation based.
I think I put based on residential square footage.
Yeah.
And we are talking about the residential fee calculation.
That's all. Yeah, we already have commercial industrial per square foot, so that wouldn't change.
This is only for residential. So provide the fee calculation, present the fee calculation. I don't know. I mean, we're asking them to calculate something. So
I think provides good.
Provide a
on both.
We're looking for two alternatives to be provided.
So provide the fee calculation based on resident. No. A, existing per unit, yeah, A, residential square footage, and B, yeah. You know, the reason for that is because I think we'll find out that for the affordable homes, those are small units and we want to encourage them. Anyway, this is not the time for that, I guess, but.
Should we say provide alternative fee calculation data?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Wow.
Are we ready to make a motion on this? Does anyone else have any more further input?
Chair Greenfield?
Yes.
Yeah, before you vote on this motion, I just want to make sure that the staff who have to implement this are clear on the direction. So Sarah, do you have any?
Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
I think, yeah, I think that's fine. We're gonna, I think we need to make sure that that we're able to access the tear down acquisition data. So we're going to need to work with planning and building to find out if that's available. So I think this is fine as it reads now. And then the fee calculation data, and I think the two methodologies should be fine. There may be an additional cost with this, so we also need to make sure that we have the fees to cover the additional work with the consultant. But I think but those are my only two reservations. Otherwise, I think that we can move forward with the motion.
Okay, thanks, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other further comments from anyone regarding the motion before we vote on it, or before someone considers making this motion?
So how can we have the motion and make a recommendation if we don't know that we have the money to actually do the work in the motion?
I think we don't know that we have the money. I think we're highlighting the need that further land evaluation cost study is needed. Councilmember Du Bois echoed this concern, yeah. and so I think this is our recommendation. We're a body that recommends. We can't mandate anything. So given the possibilities that exist, we recommend that this happen. And we suspect that this is necessary before this would get through the Finance Committee and pass City Council. Does that allay your concern?
More or less. Thank you.
Oh, hopefully it's more than less. Would anybody like to make a motion? Shani, you started this off. Would you like to make the motion that we adopt this recommendation?
I'll make the motion.
Okay. I would be happy to second the motion to move things forward. And Commissioner Kleinhaus, as the maker of the motion, would you like to speak further to the motion?
Yeah, I just wanted to again explain the fee calculation based on residential square footage and why I think it's so important. As newer homes get larger and larger, and multi-units have smaller units, I think it will bring us, well, there's two things. One is eventually we'll be required to do it anyway. And so if we do it, if we do this now, then we don't have to abide by the second part of the law, that the AB 602, that requires that we don't provide new parks that are better than the old parks. And I think that would be something to be ahead of the curve on this. And the other thing is that I do think we need to encourage smaller units. They're a lot more sustainable. They're much better. They provide what people need without the extravagance that if people want that, they should pay for it. And I think that's one way to do that. So, yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. As the seconder of the motion, I have nothing further to say. I think we've discussed everything we discussed. Would anybody else like to add any discussion?
Sure. Just a quick question. Should it be land valuation instead of evaluation?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
That's Director O'Kane caught that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Can I ask
I saw her hand was up. I thought it was still up, but anyway, go ahead, please.
Oh, can I ask a quick question too? I just want to make sure, and this is also Director O'Kane, assistance, pragmatic consideration. Can you, I want to make sure I understand what that means in the context of the number 2. And I think I have a good sense of the analysis and getting the additional data, but I'm not quite sure what pragmatic consideration means.
The way
realistic be better for you?
The way I think about that is what land actually sells for, and what,
okay.
The based, you have a study that determines what you can acquire land for. The number that's coming up doesn't seem pragmatic to the commission, to me. There may be a better word to use here. That's what it means to me.
Okay, that helps clarify. I just wanted to make sure it was in reference to the cost of land versus the actual analysis being pragmatic. So yeah. I think I understand it now.
Does anyone have a suggestion on how to clean up that verbiage?
I think we can say realistic. Maybe that's easier and maybe not. I don't know.
So as the maker of your motion, you're suggesting we change that to realistic. I can support that as the second.
If that's better, if staff thinks that's a better word.
Yeah, to move things along, does anyone have any comments on pragmatic or realistic or anything else? Any other ideas?
How about considerations, plural, realistic considerations, plural for acquiring land? I don't know.
Sure. Shani, are you okay with that, making that considerations? Mm-hmm. As the maker, and as a second, I accept that as well. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second now. Barring further comment, I suggest that Alam, that we hold a roll call vote on this.
Yes. Chair Greenfield?
Yes.
Commissioner Cribbs?
Yes.
Commissioner Brown?
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman?
Yes.
Commissioner Kleinhaus?
Yes.
Chair, that is a 5-0 vote.
Thank you. And thank you again to David for your presentation and your assistance in the process. Thank you to Sarah and Kristen and Darren and staff for their efforts on this. Thank you to the commission, and thank you to the members of the public who've been waiting anxiously for us to get to our next item of business, which is discussion of regarding court usage and joint use courts. This will be a discussion item. It's not an action this evening. Any members of the public who would like to speak, now's the time to raise your hand before we hear the staff report. Darren, would you like to introduce our next speaker, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to introduce Adam Howard, Senior Community Services Manager with Community Services Department. Thanks for being here tonight, Adam.
Thank you, Commissioners, for your time tonight. As Darren said, I'm going to discuss a little bit about court usage, specifically nighttime use and the multi-use courts at Mitchell. Let me hopefully get this presentation up and operational for you. Can you guys see it?
We do, but we also see your notes. I think in the there you go.
Now I don't see my notes. Let's see here. Okay, we still seeing the presentation on your side?
Yes, just the presentation.
Perfect. Okay, thanks. Thanks for hanging in there. So I'm gonna do a kind of a brief overview tonight. I'll give a real brief history to how we kind of got to where the courts are at this point. I'll show you kind of an overview of what our courts look like. I'll provide some feedback that I've heard thus far, just over the kind of 2-year period that our courts have changed. I'll give a small sample size of some usage data, and then we can kind of have a discussion about what we think should happen next, and obviously have a time for discussion. So a very brief overview for everybody. It was around the 2017-2019 timeframe when staff started receiving requests to kind of have a space for people to play pickleball. At that point, there was nothing in the policy that would allow it. It was very specific to tennis courts, but pickleball users kind of started using Mitchell courts 5, 6, and 7 just as available on a first come first served basis, where they weren't like having complaints, but it was very unofficial. August 29th, 2018, staff made some recommended changes to the court use policy that would allow pickleball to be played. At that time, some temporary lines were added, and some temporary priority hours were also added at that time. At that time, the priority hours were tennis was 4 to 10 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and 2 to 10 on Saturday and Sunday. And pickleball was 4 to 10 on Mondays and Wednesdays, and 8 to 2 on Saturdays and Sundays. That has since changed. So in 2019, as we continue to see growth in pickleball, staff and the PRC really wanted to try to find a way to have some designated space for pickleball. So an idea was created to create some new space, to redesignate one court in Mitchell Park to be designated pickleball space, and then make 2 more courts multi-use courts. And I will go over this in a little bit more detail on the following slides. But so that was all created. Priority times were given again to each sport. This time it was pickleball 8 to 2:30, 7 days a week, and tennis 3 to 10, 7 days a week. That all opened and went into effect in early 2020. And so we are where we currently are today. So 8 designated pickleball courts, all in Mitchell Park. 6 of those courts are lit, and the remaining 2, there's a plan in place to light those. And I will also provide more detail on that. There are 51 public tennis courts in Palo Alto, 17 lit courts, and those are spread out over 3 locations. And then the 2 multi-use courts that we previously discussed in Mitchell Park. Those can either be 2 tennis courts or 7 pickleball courts, and those are all lit. So I want to just kind of dive into the Mitchell Park complex area. This is where they're designated pickleball courts and the multi-use courts. The first area, as you can see highlighted, 2 kind of pickleball courts that are out off by themselves. Those were converted, I think, racquetball courts that we changed into pickleball courts. They weren't heavily used. So the restriping and the changing of the nets made them more accessible for pickleball, and something that was actually really quite helpful. Those are the courts that aren't currently lit. there is a plan in place to light those with new LED lights going on at all the tennis courts. The light poles that were on those courts could hold more lights. So the utilities department was able to say that we could get those lights, and the Palo Alto Pickleball Club, who's a nonprofit group here in Palo Alto, has agreed to buy those lights so that we can ultimately light those 2 courts. The next area we're going to discuss is over there to the right where the pickleball courts are and the 2 multi-use courts, and I'll get a little closer in there for you to see them. This is the overlap of those courts. Highlighted area is the new space that was created during the last project, which kind of bumped out the fence and created 2 designated pickleball courts. This is the area that was previously court 5 and turned into designated pickleball courts, which is 4 courts, all lit due to previous lighting. And these are the multi-use courts. Again, pickleball priority is 8 to 2:30, tennis priority 3 to 10, 7 days a week. The priority times were really put in place to address, at the time, the peak times for both sports. And it also created a little bit of stability rather than kind of having to guess what day you could go and when. This was streamlined across 7 days a week, make it a little bit easier, we hoped, for the community, and again, addressing both peak times. The next, I apologize, this is a very kind of rough map of the tennis court distributions, the 51 courts that are throughout Palo Alto, and again, highlighting the 17 lit courts that are at Rinconada, Pali, and Mitchell Park. The rest of the courts are in smaller groupings, 2, 4, 3, kind of throughout Palo Alto. So this has kind of been in place for 2 years. I don't have we haven't had any like stakeholder meetings. So this feedback that we've received is more what staff have heard over the last 2 years or about emails that we've gotten. What we're hearing from pickleball is that evening time has become extremely compacted. They'd like to see additional either designated space or evening priority times on these courts. And grouping of courts continues to be an important aspect for their community as the community aspect of the game. Some tennis feedback. They too, we hear about lit tennis courts being in high demand. We also have heard a little bit as I've collected data that a longer wait time, meaning if courts are filled, there's an hour and 10-minute wait time. And because it's a longer time, there's just less people that are willing to wait for the court to turn over, which I thought was kind of an important thing to hear about. Grouping of tennis courts is also important as people go looking for tennis courts where they're more grouped together, which I thought was an important thing to hear. And we continue to hear just about private lessons, especially on weekend days that are causing some issues. So outside of this, I was hoping to not talk about COVID during one meeting, but it's going to come up anyway. Some of the things that we've seen is just a lot more people being outside. Tennis, pickleball, both have actually seemed to have grown during the COVID times. And, we think that's necessarily good that people are out and about, but it does, create some issues out on our court. So as staff started to hear really from all groups that lit courts were an issue for them, we decided we needed to take a kind of a closer look at what that might look like. With the policy being in place for 2 years, we also wanted to see how things were going, see how things were working for people out at the community. So I did go out and start doing some court counts. This is a pretty small sample size. I was out there 7 nights between January 11th and February 8th. And these is some of the data that I have collected, and I'll kind of share with you what I was looking at, and then we can have time to discuss. But you can see on the left-hand side, the locations that I went to. Again, Mitchell Park courts, Rinconada courts 1 through 6. There are 9 courts at Rinconada location, but only 6 are lit, so I did not count the 3 unlit courts. And then Palo Alto High School. Along the top, you can see the day, the time, and the day of the week. You'll see a time range, 5 to 5:30. That is typically because I would start. I almost always started at Mitchell Park because this is where I work. So it was just easier for me to start my counts on these courts. And then the end time, Pali High School. So I normally start in this instance at 5, ended at Pali High School at 5:30. Just so you know, I'm obviously not in all 3 places at once. So there was a little bit of a time lapse between the counts. Highlighted green areas are showing areas where there were people waiting to play on the courts. I did miss one that I want to point out. It's the February 8th date at Mitchell Park. There's 2 waiting. I did not highlight that green, but I wanted to point that out. The areas that are completely highlighted yellow throughout the whole column are because every court at that time were full. And I thought that was an important thing to point out. And then just as a small upper, you see on the February 8th, I did mark 70 degrees out when I did this the counts. And that was also the busiest day. And it was noticeably different out at the court. So that is one of the things that I really feel like these counts need to continue as the weather gets warmer. Because it does seem like that will have an impact as we move forward. Although there's a lot of court usage, even when it's cold, but I can see things dramatically changing as we get warmer. So that is a general oversight of how I looked. I do want to stop here for just a minute. We'll have time for questions at the end, but does anyone have questions about reading this, what they're seeing? Again, we'll have a greater conversation, but I did want to stop and make sure if there's any clarifying points you like about how you're looking at this data. I think this would be a good time to just quickly answer them, as we'll probably be looking at this data a lot in the next couple of minutes.
Yeah, I note that these are all in the evening. Are you suggesting that this is the busiest time and the mornings and the afternoons weren't as, I guess, weren't impacted as much?
So that is a good question. I did start with the evenings mostly because of a lot of what I heard was around lit courts. That doesn't suggest that we don't need to look at other times. I think that's where we have the most compaction, but I think weekday mornings could have a similar point of interest moving forward, but I was just focusing on nights at this point.
Yeah.
And Adam, again, what time do the multi-use courts shift from pickleball to tennis?
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock, okay. And so that's part of the reason as well. There are more courts, more pickleball courts available for most of the day until 3 o'clock.
There are more tennis courts available during the day.
No, there are more pickleball courts available until 3 o'clock.
Yes. So up until 3 o'clock, the multi-use courts are set up as pickleball courts, which is 7 additional courts during the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll have plenty of time to talk in more detail. I just wanted to make sure it was somewhat easy to see what you wanted to be looking out for there. So, as we kind of go through this, some of the questions that staff are going to face, that the ad hoc, that I think this commission in general is, what are the pros and cons of our current court use policy and how it's working? Do demand for lit courts justify a change in priority hours, whether it's, more or less to a particular sport or interest? Does it make sense to continue having multi-use courts, or should they be changed to single-use courts to try to help with demand on one way or the other? And then kind of, I think, an important question, especially for tonight, is there additional data we want to see to kind of make changes to the policy, to make it easier for us to see a whole picture? Keeping in mind that at this point, it's just me collecting this data. So I'm somewhat limited, but I do want to continue to collect data and be specific to what I'm collecting to make sure we kind of have good information to help drive some of these conversations. kind of what's next. We need to continue to collecting data. As I've stated, I specifically want to look as it starts to get warmer. As we've discussed, I do want to meet with new ad hoc members. As we had the changeover and wanting to make sure we start getting their input. And maybe that includes specific stakeholders. I think we have a good idea of what each stakeholder group is looking for. But if we want to hone in on certain questions or get particular feedback, I think that's where meeting with stakeholders would be beneficial. And then, a return in spring or early summer or somewhere in those timelines, depending on how in depth this gets, with possible recommendations for policy changes, or not. Maybe we find that this is working just the way we want it to work. But I am dedicated, now that it's been that way for 2 years, to see how it's working for everybody and go from there. So that's kind of my spiel. And this is where I'd like to open it up to questions and comments. Sounds like members of the public as well.
Thank you, Adam, for the comprehensive overview and nice details and images for us to help understand. Are there any quick clarifying questions or comments from the commission before we go to members of the public? And again, we'll have an opportunity to comment on this discussion item after the public speaks. Nellis, you're on mute.
Yeah, good presentation. But I was going to ask about the multi-use courts, and you mentioned that there's a switch over at the point in time, I guess in the afternoon. Why is there not a consideration, I guess, to have more multi-use courts? And is there a certain amount of labor that's involved in doing so?
So that's a good question. So right now, those multi-use courts are set up by a nonprofit, the Palo Alto Pickleball Club. So if the members of a public just went out there, it would look like 2 tennis courts. It's not until some volunteers come up and take out their nets that they purchased and set them up accordingly that it actually truly becomes space usable for pickleball. So, it's difficult to have those spaces. It takes people willing to do that. And I'm sure some of them were going to be willing to speak. But that's a big thing to consider, because they're not truly multi-purpose unless somebody helps set them up. Otherwise, the members of the club, it's a tennis court without their support.
And there's additional painting of lines and so forth that have to take place as well, right?
Correct. Yeah. There's different painted stripes for the different sports to be played. That part, a little bit easier to do, but the lines by themselves aren't very effective without the additional support.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's there's a
question.
Yes, Shani.
So staff does not really maintain it for these shifts between 2 games. There's no staff time involved.
That is correct. Staff are not out at those courts at all.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's move to comments from members of the public. It's getting later in the evening. We've got 7 people who'd like to speak. So let's and the number is growing. So let's go 2 minutes per speaker, please. Alam, if we could move forward with that now, that'd be great.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Our first speaker will be Monica Williams, to be followed by Jim Y, and then Ed Anderson. Monica, if you would unmute, please, and you have 2 minutes.
Good evening, Chair Greenfield and commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, great. I'm Monica Williams, president of the Palo Alto Pickleball Club. To be respectful of the commissioners' time this evening, only a few of us will speak on behalf of all of our members. We're very excited with all the publicity about the incredible growth of pickleball featured on NPR and in the New York Times. And we're extremely proud that Mitchell Park has the reputation of being the best pickleball facility in the Bay Area. Thanks to all of you for making this so. Many families have discovered the sport and parents are bringing their children to play together after school and on weekends. We've had many requests to offer classes to kids after school. These classes bring in revenue to the city, but unfortunately the city policy does not allow pickleball play on the temporary courts from 3 to 10 p.m. each day. So please consider changing your policy to allow pickleball play at Mitchell Park all day, every day, and every evening. Also, the lines on the temporary courts are hard to see, so we would like to request that the lines on these courts be repainted with a bright yellow or orange color. The US Tennis Association approves painted lines for pickleball and junior tennis on all tennis courts. So we ask that you will also consider painting pickleball lines on the cuddly courts to make them multi-use when they are resurfaced this year. This will enable people with portable nets to play pickleball there when the tennis courts are empty. Our club is honored that we have been accepted by Roger Smith and Ed Selden to be partners with the Friends of the Palo Alto Parks. Friends of Palo Alto Pickleball will have an avenue to donate funds and receive 100% tax donation to help improve the courts at Mitchell Park. Our club membership is growing. We finished last year with 772 members. 50% of our members are Palo Alto residents, and we're aiming to raise that percentage to at least 60%. We're planning to have a youth tournament at Mitchell Park in August for ages 10 to 18. This will be sanctioned by the US Pickleball Association, and these kids will need courts to practice after school. So please update your policy to allow pickleball play all day, every day, and every evening. It's a sport that brings so much joy to
ask you to wrap up, please.
I'm wrapping up, yeah. With extra paddles for visitors, so if you haven't yet been to check out the pickleball courts, please come over and we'll be happy to give you a lesson. Thank you very much for your service to the community.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jim Y, to be followed by Ed Anderson and then Susan McConnell. Jim, if you would unmute, please.
Hello. Hello, my name is Jimmy Young. First of all, I'd like to thank the Parks and Rec for helping create a vibrant pickleball environment in Palo Alto. I'd like to speak about my experience with the sport. Pickleball at Mitchell Park is as much a game as it is a community. People can show up for any number of reasons. For many, it's a social game. Family and friends come play regularly. There are pickleball birthday parties, and if you are moving away, be prepared for someone to throw you a go-away party. Of course, for some, it's about getting exercise, and there is open play for where you can have fun competitive games. Lastly, the pickleball community is growing, and with the growth, a wonderful phenomenon has emerged: opportunities for volunteers to give back to pickleball. Players can volunteer as little or as much as they want. Some of the unrecognized volunteers do things like sweeping the courts in the morning, moving on-court trash to the public trash receptacles, moving items to lost and found, and as Adam mentioned, volunteers set up the nets every day on the shared courts. Some volunteers like to take a more visible role, as such as introducing potential new pickleballers to the sport. During off times, these volunteers wear fluorescent vests, and forego playing to give back to the community by hosting new player sessions. Some players run ad hoc skills and drill sessions. Other players organize practice times with the club provided ball machine. If you have a pickleball passion, the club will try to find a way for you to contribute to the community. The city of Palo Alto can help grow the pickleball community by prioritizing more evening play, giving players a chance to have a great pickleball experience by more than doubling the available evening lit courts. Thank you.
Thank you. And just one more request. Could we ask the speakers indicate if they're Palo Alto residents or residents of another community? I think that would be helpful.
Our next speaker will be Ed Anderson, to be followed by Susan McConnell and JD Top. Ed, if you would unmute, please.
Yes, good evening. My name is Ed Anderson. I'm a Palo Alto resident. I've been playing pickleball at Mitchell Park for the last 4 years and have seen firsthand how quickly interest in the game has grown. I think because of work schedules in school, most families would like to play after 5 o'clock, which is why the courts are always full in the evening. And yet this is when the mixed use court policy at Mitchell Park gives tennis players priority. 2 years ago, I enjoyed playing in the evenings, but as the courts got busier, the wait times for the pickleball court became unreasonable. So I just stopped playing in the evenings. I'm sure I'm not alone. I have no doubt that if there were more pickleball courts available in the evening, more working parents and families would be able to enjoy the game. I believe a switch from tennis priority to pickleball priority in the evenings would benefit a lot of families while only inconveniencing a few tennis players. I think this is borne out by the 2 court usage surveys presented this evening. We're all very grateful to the commission for the courts we have, and we hope you will continue to support this growing community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. I'm not hearing Lom. The next speaker is Susan McConnell.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I apologize, Chair. I was on mute. I noticed that.
No problem.
Okay, should I just start?
Yes, please.
Okay, good evening. My name is Susan McConnell. I've lived in Palo Alto for 49 years. Pickleball is not just for seniors like me. Besides the explosive interest in pickleball for adults, this is also happening with younger players. Palo Alto High School now has an official pickleball club. Pickleball is taught in freshman PE in Palo Alto high schools. Speaking from my own experience, I've taught my 3 grandsons to play pickleball. They've totally embraced it. When they visit here, they love going to Mitchell Park and playing pickleball with me. Palo Alto has always supported sports for youth. You now have an opportunity to further youth pickleball. This can be done at the Mitchell Park pickleball courts. Palo Alto Pickleball Club parents are begging us to run clinics for their children. We would be happy to do youth clinics, but the Mitchell Park priority hours make it impossible. The clinics need to be held after school, but pickleball loses priority at 3 p.m. It would be unfair to our members to use the few dedicated courts that we have for youth clinics. We need to have the multi-use courts available. It's time for the back courts at Mitchell Park to be for pickleball only. Tennis players have many other options. Pickleball players in Palo Alto only have these courts. Please support this change. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
Our next speaker will be Lisa Steinbach, to be followed by Amy Lauterbach. Lisa, if you unmute, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yeah, so my name's Lisa Steinbach. I'm a resident of Palo Alto, mostly a tennis player, but I appreciate that pickleball is very popular now. What I would like to have Palo Alto look at is setting up of more pickleball courts across the whole city. Okay, not just at Mitchell Park or South Palo Alto. So if someone can go check out Rangsdorf Park, what they've done over there in Mountain View is they had an existing cement slab that was for some aging handball courts that weren't utilized that much. And what they did is they converted that slab. It's in Rangsdorf Park, adjacent to the tennis courts. They converted it into pickleball courts. And what I'd like Palo Alto to do is let's find more cement slabs that are already there that could be converted into pickleball courts. One such old slab that's not being used at all, hardly, is at Hoover Park. There are some ancient, and I mean ancient, handball courts there that could easily be repurposed into pickleball courts. That would help the daytime, particularly in summer up till 8 p.m., having pickleball courts spread out across the city so that families in all these neighborhoods can walk down to their local parks and play. Instead of having this big kind of fight contention at Mitchell Park. And again, it would be easy because there are already cement slabs there. And that is my main point, that Mountain View has been able to do this. I think Palo Alto should look into it. And that would help ease some of the strain on the usage. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Our next speaker will be Amy Lauterbach, to be followed by Rich Pearson. Amy, if you unmute, please.
Good evening, and thank you for giving me a minute. I'm Amy Lauterbach. I've lived in Palo Alto for 40 years, and I'm the membership coordinator for the Palo Alto Pickleball Club. Our club is incredibly proud to partner with the city to create and nurture a gathering place for all members of our community. We welcome all ages, abilities, languages, cultures, and levels of income. Our club members enthusiastically welcome neighbors who are new to pickleball. We often wave people in who are walking past the park on their way to the library. We encourage all commissioners to come visit our courts and see what a joyful and enthusiastic community of players crowd our courts every single day. Thank you for your ongoing support of our effort to create our welcoming and inclusive space where we meet and play with our neighbors.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Our next speaker will be Rich Pearson, to be followed by Joseph Afong, and our final speaker will be Jen. Rich, if you would unmute, please.
Good evening. Thank you for your time tonight. My name is Rich Pearson, and I've lived in Palo Alto since 2007. I used to play casual tennis at Rinconada, but was introduced to pickleball after my wife, Jamie, took a class through the city of Palo Alto. Like many others, I haven't played a set of tennis since I started playing pickleball. In 2019, this commission invested in 6 permanent courts, and the city immediately became a leader in the Bay Area pickleball community. Since then, Palo Alto has hosted the Bay Area Senior Games and will soon run one of the first youth pickleball tournaments ever held in Northern California, as Monica mentioned. The pickleball community is thriving in Palo Alto because of the wise decision this commission made in 2019. Tonight, we're asking for your help to keep us thriving. We are not requesting money or upgrades to the courts. Instead, we are asking that you propose a court policy change that shifts a mere 10% of Palo Alto's night tennis court capacity to pickleball in order to serve more residents. Given the court usage data shared tonight, and Joe's going to share some in just a second, and the fact that prioritizing pickleball at night on courts 6 and 7, you are trading 4 tennis player spots for 28 pickleball player spots, this seems like another wise decision. Thanks for your service to the city of Palo Alto, and thanks for supporting a community that benefits Palo Alto residents of all ages, abilities, languages, cultures, and levels of income. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
Chair, our next speaker is Joseph Afong, and Joseph has asked that I share a screen of a report that he has. Oh, looks like Darren just brought it up. Thank you.
Please go ahead, Joseph. You've got 2 minutes.
Joseph, you unmute, please.
Hi, good evening. Sorry. Good evening, Commission members. I'm Joseph Fong, a Palo Alto resident for 36 years. For 2 weeks, 2 times each evening in June of last year, we had a team of 8 people conduct a field survey on the usage of lighted tennis and pickleball courts in Palo Alto. I have submitted a copy of survey report to Commission. This evening, I'd like to share with you 3 charts with you. The first chart, pickleball courts in Palo Alto evenings are very well used. The 2 bars on the left show that they use 88 and 95% at our 2 survey times. The key takeaway here is that pickleball court usage is much higher than tennis courts. Next slide, please, figure 2. The survey also showed that there are many more pickleball players than tennis players per court, both in terms of those playing and those waiting to play. The blue bars are the number of players at the 2 survey times. The 2 blue bars on the left for pickleball players are much higher than 2 blue bars on the right for tennis players. But what is most telling in this graph is the number of people waiting to play. The red bars on the left shows that there were lots of pickleball players waiting to play, and the 2 red bars on the right shows that there were hardly any tennis player waiting to play. Next slide, please. The pickleball courts were fully utilized, much more than tennis courts. Here, the blue bars on the left show the pickleball play courts were full about 3/4 of the time. Rectal tennis courts, the most popular court, was full about half the time. At Mitchell Park, the tennis courts were full about 1/5 of the time. The Pavilion courts were never full. And the pressure of this is that there's always an open court in the evening for a tennis player. As for the pickleball player, there's no option to play elsewhere. Please utilize the data and finding of this survey for your policy information. If you have any question, I'm most happy to answer them at any time. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Our final speaker is Janet. Janet, if you could unmute and also identify your last name, please.
I'm okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hi, my name is Jenny, and last name is Chan, C-H-A-N. And I'm actually I'm a Palo Alto resident, and I've been playing tennis at Mitchell Park for, I would say, since I was in high school. And I actually, last year, I cannot get court at night at Mitchell Park many times. And I got so frustrated that I actually joined a private club so I can play tennis at night. So this tells you that there is a court demand from tennis players to play at night at Mitchell Park. And not everyone's like me, especially kids, that can just go ahead and join a private club so we can get tennis courts. I know pickleball is getting really popular. And it's very social, it's fun. And there's a lot of new tennis players as well. So there's definitely demand from both sides. And tennis players at night in South Palo Alto really don't have that many choices. We only have Mitchell Park. I don't play at Pally because Pally lightings are horrible. The middle courts at Pally have almost no lights shining on those courts, and it's just horrible lighting. And so the only choices as a South Palo Alto resident for me was only Mitchell Park. And then I couldn't get any courts at night, so I had to go join a private club, as I stated earlier. So I don't play tennis anymore at Mitchell Park because I couldn't get courts at nighttime. So I think Lisa, a tennis player earlier, suggested is very good. I think we should find other places to build more pickleball courts to accommodate this demand. But taking tennis courts away from Mitchell Park at night is not the solution, because I see a lot more young kids now playing tennis after school also at nighttime. So I think we need to find a solution to meet both demands. Maybe can we install lights at Cubberley, at Gunn? I don't know. So I think we have to find a way to satisfy both demand and not rob Peter to pay Paul.
Thank you, Jen. And Chair, that concludes the speakers.
Thank you, Long. So let's now turn to the commissioners for comments, and recognizing that this is a discussion item. We're not taking any action this evening. Adam's done a good job of framing areas for our discussion in terms of the questions he posed. He's also given us a potential timeline that we'll be looking to, the feedback we provide will be taken by the ad hoc to consider a policy change or not, and return to us sometime in the next few months. Is any staff want to say anything before we move forward with the commissioner comments? Commissioner Freeman, your hand is up.
Yeah, I'll be brief. And thank you, Adam, for your presentation. And also want to thank the public stakeholders out there who presented their case. Yeah, I mean, pickleball is a sport that is growing in leaps and bounds, and it has been. I mean, for an awful long time, and I really think that the problem we see today is probably going to be a lot worse in the next 6 months or even longer than that. I don't think it's a sport that's just going to go away. I think the city has done a good job of, you know, being on the forefront in the early stages. We have an opportunity here to take this a step further. And it, you know, I think a couple of the public comments were alluded to the fact that, you know, this is a sport that crosses all boundaries across all age groups. It gives people an opportunity to get out. It gives families an opportunity to be together. And in some ways, it's also giving people an opportunity to stay healthy and exercise. So I think I'd like to see, you know, working with Adam and coming up with a way that we can kind of meet the challenge on both sides. That is, given meeting the needs of our tennis community, but also of our growing pickleball community.
Thank you. And actually, I'm seeing now I should have asked to hear from the ad hoc members first. So I'll belatedly reach out, and Ann, your hand's up. So please proceed.
Well, my hand's up because both Commissioner Freeman and I are new members of the ad hoc committee, and we're lucky to have Commissioner Brown, who has been on the ad hoc committee before, providing continuity. So I think we're all excited to hear Adam's report and also have the report on usage that Darren forwarded to us earlier. I think this is going to be an exciting challenge to solve, and I think it's definitely very solvable. I'm delighted that both the tennis community and the pickleball community are talking, and hopefully we can all talk to each other and see what the options are for lighting courts and readjusting some of the times and looking at the best way to make sure that in this time of getting out of COVID, that people have a place to come and play tennis and come and play pickleball, grow both sports. I think it's great that the community wants to be outside. So I'm excited about the next 6 months and Adam's timeline. So thank you very much. I want to thank the members of the public who took the time to come and speak, and certainly happy that 700 members of the pickleball club were not with us all tonight, although I know that they are in spirit. And I would like to see if we could get really specific, Adam, about some costs for lighting per court, and which courts are candidates for lighting. I know that's a detail not for this discussion tonight, but I think it would be really helpful. So anyhow, I just like to thank both the tennis community and the pickleball community, certainly the staff, for all of the thought that's been put into this. And I look forward to working on the challenge.
Thank you. Commissioner Brown.
Yeah, it's a lot of give and take and compromise I see in the future for this issue. I do appreciate the very thoughtful options that were suggested tonight and in the past, as well as all the data. Love the charts and I love the effort that both staff and community members went to provide us that information. I know that that could be very time consuming. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to come up with some priorities, come up with some innovative solutions. Fortunately, pickleball in Palo Alto is not the only place it's popular. It's popular lots of places. So I'm looking forward to seeing how other communities have found innovative solutions. And yeah, I also think that the sense of community, both in tennis and pickleball, is more important than ever, given that we live in this very virtual world, and the in-person interaction is very important. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Shani.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. Others have expressed it well. There's a lot of demand, and I kind of like the idea of innovative. I'm not sure what that would be, but I'm thinking there are a lot of areas now that, you know, I'm thinking of Cabaret parking lots. No cars there most of the time, almost never. Maybe we could look at some of those parking lots as, even if it's temporary, I don't know if that's something feasible or not, but could add some areas that are really not used at all. And also maybe we don't want to have a lot of parking and could use some of those parking lots. And with Caberly, it's going to take so long before there's a solution there, like, you know, that the city knows what to do with it. The negotiations will take years, the decision of what to do. Maybe that's a place that we can add some. I don't know. I'll leave that to staff and to the ad hoc committee to look at it. Just something that I think could potentially be an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank staff for all the work they've done presenting this and working with both pickleball and tennis community all along. I want to thank the members of the public who took the time to comment this evening, and rather succinctly, and providing different bits of color and not repeating what other people said. That's very helpful for the commission to hear. A couple considerations that kind of leap out to me are lighting of courts. You know, if we could, it sounds like the pressure point here is the limitation of lighted courts, and finding new courts that could be, we could find funding for additional lighting would be a key. Perhaps Coverly is an option, as someone else has already mentioned. Coverly has been in a difficult position in terms of hesitance to pour investment dollars there now, but we might be on the cusp of change there. And even if things aren't going to be changing, at some point we need to consider what makes sense in a near or moderate term time horizon. Location is key as well. I am hearing both the pickleball and tennis communities want clusters of courts available. Also related to location is noise, and I know that pickleball is considerably noisier than tennis, given the number of people, the number of balls playing the action itself, and so I think I've heard from staff previously that a location like Hoover Park would not be appropriate for pickleball given its proximity to residences. So we do have kind of a sweet spot where we are at Mitchell Park in the back corner. So that's a positive thing. You know, but if there are a way to find a way to get lights added to Coverly, and we're already getting the tennis courts resurfaced, if that becomes a reasonable tennis destination for evening play, then it would make it easier for us to fully dedicate all of the courts near the Magical Bridge area to permanently to pickleball. As far as data that we're looking for, Adam's given us some good data from December. I agree that a more seasonal cross section, particularly as applies to warmer months, is important. We had a member of the public present some data. It looks very useful on the surface. It'd be helpful to get staff to do an assessment of this data and make a recommendation if this is something that the commission should be considering, as well as some data points to help us make our decisions. I was curious about tennis play at Pally. Wondering if it was if there was an awareness within the tennis community that those courts were available. Now, based on some public comment this evening, it sounds like the quality of the courts at Pally at night is an issue, so that could help describe or help explain why some of the usage numbers are lower at Pally. It'd be good to get staff feedback and comment on that as well moving forward. That's all I have. Councilmember Du Bois, do you have anything you'd like to comment on?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any staff members have any further comment they'd like to make, or and after followed by Commissioner follow-up comments?
No, not really. I appreciate it. I know we've looked into some of this information. You know, you talked about locations, but I think I'm really open to trying to be creative and trying to find solutions here, right? Because I ultimately would like to find a way to help both communities. I struggle with any proposal that's is gonna decrease the ability for one to play one sport. You know, and it is a struggle, and at first glance, it feels like that's your only option. But I'm committed to doing my best to find a solution that works for everybody, or, you know, whether it's multiple solutions that will increase our ability to use our courts better. Maybe that's part of the solution, right? Just making it easier for people to use our courts, or knowing what courts are open, or there's a lot of other options that I hope we can dig into a little bit and find something that's good for everybody, or most people.
Oh, thank you. I heard words like creative and innovative echoed a number of times regarding solutions. You know, in addition to lighting and location, there's the funding is a challenge. That's part of the puzzle. So something else. Nellis, you have your hand up.
Yeah. I was just going to say, it seems like we have a public out there that's really anxious to get started and are more than willing to participate in the process, and that's a good thing, which would I think take off some of the pressure from staff. On the other side of that would be things that we can do on our own, such as, you know, prepping the courts to be able at some point to be used as multi-purpose courts, and that of course would include painting. But the other thing is we're not alone in this effort, because there's a lot of other cities across the nation that are going through the same thing. So a lot of the data points are probably already there, and that would be looking at what some of the other cities are doing and trying to tap into that and kind of morph that into things that we can do in our city. I think gives us an opportunity too to be kind of that model that maybe other cities can use to build onto their programs, and not for us to sort of be in the back end of that. So it's just some thoughts, and that is, I mean, I think it's very easy. I mean, I've seen some stats of where you could have, I guess, potentially 4 pickleball courts on 2 tennis courts or 1 tennis court. So there's a lot of things out there that we can probably do that would help the public and the growth that this sport is actually starting to take off.
Thank you.
Well, I would just quickly just like to add that, you know, their point of what other neighboring cities are doing, and we were kind of on the forefront, and we still are. So ultimately, I have a lot of conversations with other cities about what we're doing and how we can help them, and I love to do it. But, you know, unfortunately, in some regards, when I ask for help, like, oh, we were going to call you. So it's a good problem, and luckily in our field in recreation, we all help each other with our cities. So we're all in contact and we address problems together. So I will continue to kind of use that model of how can we all do this to generally help, you know, the peninsula or further, depending on how big of a picture we want to look. But we continue to look for those resources in other cities to try to just, what's that best model or another model?
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, great words. We'll close this item and look forward to creative and innovative solutions getting worked on by the ad hoc and returning to the commission to present.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next on the agenda is the commissioner board member questions, comments, announcements, and future agenda. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Announcements? We have already talked a little bit about what's coming forward in terms of the work ahead of us and the ad hoc work for work plans. Darren, for future agenda items, it sounds like in March we will have the work plan. There's a possibility that the tree ordinance review will be coming to the commission as well. If that does happen, that would probably be a pretty full agenda. What else do you have on tap?
The Baylands Comprehensive Conservation Plans, the other one, Chair.
Okay. And is that time sensitive?
Yes. Yeah, I do have to move that along before the contracts expire for the two consultants who are helping with that process.
Anne?
I wanted to make sure that we had the youth council, I believe was scheduled in March to come and make a presentation. We had invited them. So
yeah, maybe
March or April.
I had talked to Adam Howard a little bit about that, and Adam had explained there might be some challenges for the youth council themselves. They'll be presenting to council as well, and they're a little challenged for time. Maybe Adam could spend just a moment explaining that in more detail.
Yeah, so and I apologize. I was actually going to reach out last week and just didn't get to it. So it is a difficult date for the youth council, but they are committed to wanting to participate. The March would be the last meeting they're available, as they would kind of disband for the summer after that.
Mm-hmm.
So they're understanding. They're not heartbroken if they can't come, and it's difficult. So there's kind of a middle ground. Like if we don't want it to be too impactful for either side, I think is kind of what I'm trying to get at. So unless there's like a perfect fit, we can pass. I mean, it's
so maybe we just pass this year and just make sure that they know that at the end of the sort of 3/4 through the year, they have a standing invitation to come, because I think it's really great for us to hear from them and hear their perspective and all of that. And then when they go to council, maybe you can let us know and we can hook in to listen to their report at council so that they don't have to. I understand they're busy and they do a lot of great stuff, but I wanted to make sure that on our side, we didn't forget about it.
And I definitely appreciate that. And they definitely appreciate it as well. And I think maybe it's just on my side, we'll schedule a little earlier, get it worked out a little bit cleaner for next school year, if that's okay. We can make the date work. I don't want to make it sound like we can't come, but
no, I get it. It's absolutely perfect. And I will see them and let them know that the next time I come to one of their meetings. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So Adam, what is the timeline for the youth council? They start in September with a new group?
Yeah. Yeah. It's basically a September through a March, roughly.
And so would something like October, November be a reasonable time so that they've had enough time together and could come present something to us?
So I think it just depends on what, typically these presentations are towards the end of the school year and a little bit about what they've done. But I do kind of like the idea, depending on how you guys want the discussion to go, is if at the beginning of the school year, it kind of helps shape some of what the school year could look like, what their interests are, what your interests are, and if there's some middle ground where we could work together or focus on a certain subject together, that would be great too.
Well, also if they're presenting to city council in the spring, maybe it would reduce the load if there were some presentation to the commission in the fall.
we're open to both models, really.
All right, let's put a pin in that one, and we'll get back to it, and we'll also confirm soon if whether we would try to move forward in March with you. So, okay, so we're okay. Anything else from any council members, commissioner, sorry, or council member Du Bois? All right, with that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks,
Night, everybody. Thank you.
Night, everybody.
Everybody.